participated in the poll. Thank you very much, Fadila, for hitting the record button before I get too far into it. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. I know it is, well, whenever you have a webinar or a presentation or anything like that where you have representation from all over the world, then obviously we have people at very early in the morning or very late at night. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here today and taking the time out of your day for this webinar on abandoned, lost, discarded fishing gear in the Caribbean, with a focus on solutions for end-of-life gear. So just to orient everyone on this International Women's Day, so thank you again for being here for that. The workshop objectives are really to enhance regional dialogue and coordination to address ALDFG in the Caribbean, specifically around options for end-of-life gear. So that will be one of the focuses today, particularly in the second half. We will be presenting some baseline work in the interim about work that's been done in the Caribbean to date by the GGGI, the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, as well as the GCFI, the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute. We'll be presenting some top-line pieces from our regional action plan for ALDFG, or the RAP as we call it, that had feedback from multiple Caribbean states and is trying to take a regional look at ALDFG, although we'll go through also some challenges on why that is a difficult thing to do, particularly in the Caribbean. And then we will have some presentations on some case studies, approaches to end-of-life gear solutions that think a little bit outside the box. Most people, when they think about end-of-life gear solutions, they're thinking about recycling, which might be the gold standard where that's possible. But at the end of the day, that's just not possible everywhere. And we'll go into some of the challenges that we ran into when we were working in the Caribbean around end-of-life gear. And we will have some excellent speakers here today. I'm really excited. We have Lynette Griffiths from Arab Arts in Australia, who I think it's 1 a.m. for you, Lynette. I'm really impressed at that dedication, so thank you for being here for that. We have Laura Ludwig from the Center for Coastal Studies in the United States. We have Emmanuel Sofa from the Stand Up for Environment Restoration Initiative, or SOFR initiative in Nigeria. And we have Kendall Berna. I'm not sure if actually Kendall's going to be able to make it, so I might need to actually play a recorded presentation. I'm not sure if she'll be able to make it with that. She's from the British Virgin Islands, and we'll be talking about some of the stuff that's being done on the ground in the Caribbean. And then we'll open it up to an open discussion for trying to, asking questions and making sure that we're covering everything that we need to cover. I should also point out that we want this today to be quite an interactive session. So after each one of those sort of segments that we have, we will open it up for questions. We will do our best to answer as many of them as we can while also trying to keep to time, but don't be shy. If you have a question, please either use the chat, we'll be monitoring that, or feel free to raise your hand and someone will bump me and let me know that you have your hand raised, and feel free to ask that question directly. If we don't get a chance to answer your question during the actual session, because we just have to move on with the agenda, please stick around, because for the open discussion at the end, of course, that will be open for all questions. So if you don't get a chance to answer or so have your question answered right away, and we have to move on in terms of time, then please keep that question in mind and please ask it later on. And yeah, then I think we will have that open discussion, try to keep this very interactive to the extent that we can, and then look at next steps and where do we go from here. So with that, Fadila, is there anything else that I've missed that you'd like to mention?
No, that's great.
Okay, terrific. Well, with that, then I will start today's presentation. All right. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, Joe, we can see.
Terrific. Okay, well, thanks very much again, everyone, for being here today. Again, for those who don't know me, my name is Joel Basic. I'm the Associate Director for the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, or the GGGI as we call it, and we'll probably be referring to it throughout this presentation and this workshop today. My background is in Canada's commercial fishing industry. Prior to taking on this role about 6 years ago now, I worked for Canada's commercial fishing industry for 20 years, working for the largest harbor in Canada, and I created an end-of-life net recycling program there. So this topic is very much in my wheelhouse, and I was really looking forward to the discussion here today and hearing from our speakers a little bit later on. So very quickly, I'll go through these slides quickly because most of the people here know what ghost gear is and where it comes from, but just very quickly, so we orient ourselves. Ghost gear is the most common name for abandoned and lost discarded fishing gear, and it is the most harmful form of marine debris pound for pound, which is unsurprising because it's purposely designed to capture aquatic life. That's what its job is. We don't really know how much is out there, how much is lost every year. Estimates suggest that it could be up to 10%, or a 2009 estimate suggested it might be up to 10%. More recent studies suggest 46 to 70% of the floating macroplastic in the ocean gyres is thought to be gear. That actually, that 70% number has recently been updated to around 86%, specifically in the North Pacific gyre. It's a big problem, and there are ongoing research efforts to try to quantify it around the world, but there's no doubt about its impact. Between 5 to 30% of certain fish stocks are affected by ALDFG every year, which has major impacts on biodiversity as well as food security. So it's definitely one of the major issues concerning the ocean right now. Not that the ocean doesn't have enough to deal with. And what causes ghost gear? This is another important thing. We know that generally speaking, this is not about fishermen or fishers throwing gear over the side of their boats as a means of disposal, although that can happen where there are no alternatives for end-of-life disposal options. And this is one of the key themes of the webinar today. Most of the causes of ALDFG or ghost gear around the world have to do with strong weather conditions, strong currents, strong winds, interactions with other marine traffic that don't realize it's there and driving over it, spatial pressures where you have different fishing activities with different gear types harvesting different species in the same place and time, and on it goes. But generally speaking, these are things that just are a byproduct of fishing. So this is why you see gear loss to some degree wherever there's fishing that takes place. But again, no fisher ever wants to lose their gear. We totally understand that. And in terms of impacts, again, we're talking about mortality of harvestable species as well as other marine life, so birds, mammals, things like that, habitat and benthic damage from nets and heavy structures. So again, the impacts of gear actually will differ depending on the gear type. So the impact of a net is not necessarily going to be the same as a pot or a trap, is not going to be the same as a fish aggregating device or whatever it is. So there is variability there, but overall, this is what we're looking at. There's also some other things like the social impact of fishing debris. So we're talking about recreational value of coastal waters for diving and tourism, and the impact on the social license to operate in terms of aquaculture, for example. If there's a lot of aquaculture debris, obviously that can create some social issues where people don't want to see aquaculture farms where that is happening. So there's a bit of the social aspect that is not always recognized. Again, a potential vector for alien aquatic species. So things can attach themselves to this gear as it drifts from one place to another. Lynette, as one example, who is here as a speaker today, can be able to talk about how a lot of the stuff that they're finding in her region in northeastern Australia and the Gulf of Carpentaria actually doesn't originate from there. It comes from quite far away, and so it can be a vector for transportation of non-Indigenous species. Navigation hazards as well, fouling, entanglement of propellers, so safety at sea concerns, and then obviously the link to microplastics as well. So as these items that are mostly made of plastic degrade in the UV and the wave action, that will create abrasion over time and contribute to the micro and nanoplastic issues. So it's a multifaceted challenge and concern. And so what is the GGGI? Housed under Ocean Conservancy, the GGGI is the only cross-sectoral alliance committed to solving this problem in a holistic way around the world. So I'll go through our membership in just a minute, but basically we are an umbrella organization under which we have 135 or so member organizations from around the world, from different stakeholder groups, trying to collectively address this. Everyone has a different approach, and that's okay. We're here to sort of be the guiding light and try to ensure that everyone's impacts are being properly recognized, as well as making sure that we can catalyze and replicate those solutions in different parts of the world, which is one of the key reasons we're having this webinar/workshop today. And again, we want to improve the health of marine ecosystems, protect aquatic life from harm, and safeguard human health and livelihoods. And each one of those is equally important as the others. And we do this by preventing gear from being lost, by promoting best practices, by mitigating the impacts of gear when it does get lost in terms of things like escape hatches on traps or pots, for example, and remediating the effects of gear that does get lost via targeted removal efforts in sensitive areas. We do have a global reach, again, 135 member organizations, 20 supporting governments, 4 high-level affiliates in the UNFAO, the United Nations Environment Program, the OSPAR Commission, and ECDG or the Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries out of the European Union. And we have, as you can see, our members are distributed all over the world. So we have representation in the GGGI membership from 6 continents, every continent except Antarctica. Our members, I won't spend much time on this slide, but a quick snapshot of who we're looking at. As you can see, we have NGOs, we have academics, we have government members, we have fisheries and industry representation, retailers, and from very, very small organizations doing great boots on the ground work, all the way up to massive global corporates and everything in between. So there really is a space for everyone within the GGGI. Again, industry engagement is crucial. We want to raise awareness about the issue and want to work positively with industry. And when we say industry, that means from fishermen on the ground all the way through to the entire seafood supply chain. So corporates, seafood companies, retailers, gear manufacturers, everybody who has a part to play. And we want to make sure that the solutions that we develop are done jointly and that they work with the industry and make sure that the solutions that we propose or that we come up with jointly are viable, they're lasting, and that they make sense for the industry. And that will come into play when I talk about the regional action plan as well. A quick note on our best practice frameworks for the management of fishing and aquaculture gear. These 2 documents are meant to be comprehensive guidance documents that go through the background of the issue in both the wild capture and the aquaculture side of things when it comes to gear loss and debris. Guidances across prevention, mitigation, remediation strategies, as I talked about earlier. And again, they're very high level but far-reaching documents. So they're designed to be incorporated into CSR documents, different policies, management plans, seafood certification programs, voluntary guidelines, even used for developing projects and things like that. So they're very high level, far-reaching documents, but they're what we use as a reference point for doing project work and engagement throughout the collective. They're both freely available on the GGGI website, ghostgear.org. In our resources section, you can find them there. Just a quick note on our data portal too. It's a resource where we take as many different disparate data sets on gear loss from around the world, bring them all into one place at globalghostgearportal.net. Anyone can create a free account, and the idea is to get as much data in there as possible and make that publicly accessible for research purposes and things of that nature. I can go into more detail about that. For those who are interested, feel free to reach out to me later and I can go into a little bit more detail, but that is a resource that exists and one that we would like to see used. Also, just quickly noting on government engagement that we do within the GGGI. So we've done some evaluation and risk assessments of with certain countries, including high-risk gear types, looking at national action plans, predictive modeling to see where gear loss is likely to occur based on fisheries effort data, weather, bathymetry, those types of things, with some of our partners. And suggesting revisions to fisheries management plans, adding ghost gear strategies, similar to what we've done in the Caribbean with the regional action plan, and development support of relevant pieces within national waters and transboundary risk assessments, those types of things. So we have worked with governments. We will continue to do so with our 20 member governments and those who are also interested in participating in this. And just a quick snapshot of our solutions projects around the world. We have quite a few going on, and this changes all the time, but some of our highlights, as you can see, a global footprint when it comes to our solutions work. I'll just do a quick overview of what we've done in the Caribbean so far before I hand over to Fadila to talk about what GCFI has been doing as well. Our current GGGI project in the Caribbean has been taking place in Belize, Grenada, Jamaica, Montserrat, and now Trinidad and Tobago, which is just starting right now. It has been multifaceted, so I'll go through some of those things. First, it's been capacity building, regional workshops. I should actually say capacity sharing, because it's not just about building, it's about understanding what's going on in the region, and making sure that our best practices that we recommend are actually tailored to the region, which is a big part of the regional action plan. So we did some workshops. All of them had to be virtual, unfortunately, because of COVID, but I think they were very well attended by both fishers and fisheries managers for the most part. And it was through those workshops and that engagement that we distilled a lot of the information that we got and put it into the regional action plan that we will be talking about in a bit. Outreach and education, obviously this is always a two-way street, learning about what the key issues that are happening in the region, what the key drivers are. And again, this was really important for us to talk to fishers and local community members and government folks on the ground to understand what are the key drivers. We know what the key drivers are for gear loss in general, but the proportion of those in each different context is very different. And we needed to understand that in order to come up with a regional action plan that makes sense and is tailored to that particular region. So that was a crucial part of what we do. And we also did some fisher surveys in Belize, Grenada, Jamaica, Montserrat. We are doing them right now in Trinidad and Tobago as well. And the idea here was to work with the UN FAO surveys that they've created to try to quantify what is going on in terms of gear loss in different fisheries around the world, working with our partners on the ground, with the governments of these countries, as well as local consultants, to try to go around and interview fishermen and try to understand what is actually going on the ground, and what are the key drivers of gear loss to sort of contribute to a global study on this, to try to come up with a quantitative answer for what is actually happening and the impacts that it might have on local marine life. Just a quick snapshot of what some of the answers from those. So this is by no means comprehensive. This is just an idea, a sort of a snapshot of what some of these answers for some of these surveys look like. And as you can see, this is particularly this one's on gill nets. You can see that there's some variability in the different causes of gear loss when it comes to this, and those sliding scales will vary depending on the country and the regions that you're in. But just so you can see a snapshot of what we're looking at. And also some of the fisher suggested prevention methods that would be most effective for them. And again, this will vary hugely by region, and something we really need to consider because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. We also did some gear testing there. We did some testing with blue ocean gear, smart buoys in the spiny lobster fishery in Jamaica as a way to detect these buoys float on the surface. You attach them to your regular marker buoy, and they will give you real-time information via GPS on where your gear is, and if it has moved for any reason, whether that's weather or what have you, then you can actually track that buoy in real time and go back and get your gear. So that was tested in Jamaica. We also did some testing of the rescue unit device, which you can see there is a combination of an escape hatch and an emergency buoy. The initial testing that we did involved the cotton rot cord version of it, which means that when you put that trap in the water after a certain amount of time, that cotton rot cord, which affixes that yellow buoy to the black ring that you can see on the traps, would deteriorate. And if that trap had not been removed in that amount of time because it was lost or the buoy got taken off the main buoy, then that emergency buoy would pop up. You have your name and contact information on the top of it, and people can let you know where your trap is and retrieve it for you, or you can retrieve it yourself if you're out there. And this year we are doing some testing, some additional testing in Jamaica of this unit, but the electronic time released version. So rather than relying on a biodegradable rot cord, you can actually program for how long you want that buoy to be down before it pops up, which would be more beneficial, I think, for the fishers in Jamaica. That was feedback that we had received because they're not out there for very long. So working on those trials right now as well. Again, just a few more snapshots of the fishers in Jamaica with those gears and doing the testing, more snapshots of them doing it out on the water, testing it with the Antillean Z traps. We also did some UAV and machine learning trials for identifying lost gear from the air, from UAV surveys. We've done this in Belize, in Jamaica, and I think we are doing some in Trinidad and Tobago right now. This is a way to build a tool that the GGGI is working on to allow others to do similar UAV surveys and have our AI tool automatically identify gear that has been lost. I can talk more about that. If anybody's interested, feel free to reach out to me after the fact as well, after the presentations. And with that, I will stop talking finally, and I will pass this on to Fadila to run through her slides on what GCFI has been doing in the region.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fadila Ali. I am the Assistant Executive Director of the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute. And together with UNET's Caribbean Environment Program, we are the co-host for the Global Partnership on Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution, the Caribbean Node. Next, please, Joel. So GPML Carib is a partnership. It's the Caribbean node of the overall global partnership on marine litter and plastic pollution, which is a partnership for national and regional organizations and all the major actors that are working on reducing the quantity and impact of marine litter. Our work would support governments in meeting their national, regional, and global agendas and at the high level fora, as well as other things such as regional action plans. And as previously mentioned, the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute, together with the Secretariat for the Cartagena Convention, we serve as the co-host for the Caribbean node. Next, please, Joel. One part of GCFI's work is our recognition on the importance of fishers. So at GCFI, we have the Fisheries for Fishers initiative, which is founded on that principle that fishers must be engaged and they should also be empowered and be part of the process of managing marine resources, as they are often the ones that are using and most aware of these resources. As part of our Fisheries for Fishers initiative, we have the Gladden Memorial Award, which we commonly refer to as the GMA. And this is awarded annually, and it recognizes a fisher within the wider Caribbean region who, for example, have demonstrated some form of long-term conservation ethic. We've had instances where we've had fishers that have moved from being poachers of sea turtles to then ending up being conservationists of sea turtles. And as of 2022, we have 24 individuals from throughout the region, and this includes 3 women. I believe some of them are actually on this call, from 18 countries within the wider Caribbean region who have received this award. And the importance of this of having so many different individuals is that we have created a network. So we have fishers that can have this sort of peer-to-peer conversation with other fishers from the region. And we also bring them to our annual meetings where they get a fora to share information on the state of resources, state of their fisheries, and their experiences, which we do recognize as being a very important voice. Next, please, Joel. And as a follow-up to what Joel would have presented, so in addition to the predictive modeling and hotspot work, as well as the gear testing, the artificial intelligence work, GCFI has also been working with GGGI in development of communication materials. And as Jill would have mentioned, we would have had the regional action plan developed in 2021. So it's a very rich document that has a lot of information, but isn't necessarily the most easy to digest for all audience groups. So using the information that was gathered in the regional action plan, we worked with some graphic designers within Bonaire to develop some communication products focused towards fishers. So on the screen right now on the right, there's a single large poster that was intended for use outside of fishing cooperatives, public markets, any sort of public place where fishers or community members may be congregated. And then on the left, there are a series of 4 what we call mini posters, which were developed with the intention of distributing to individuals. So they can have these as things that they can take home or share with on an individual level. Next, please, Joel. And we recognize that the most effective way of sharing messages to other, sharing the message to other fishers would be utilizing fishers to do this. So with funding from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, who has funded the majority of our Go Scare work within the region in partnership with the GGGI, we utilize past Gladden Memorial Award winners. And using the communication products that was on the previous slide, these GMA ambassadors went to all the different fishing communities, markets, cooperatives, fish processing plants, and any sort of public areas where they could interact with fishers, but also they visited local communities to raise awareness. Throughout the Caribbean, it's really hard to say who is a fisher. Everyone is a fisher. They can have someone who works in an electric company, but they fish on weekends and they are a fisher. So it's not necessarily that you have to go to the fish markets or the fish cooperatives. And that's why we saw the importance of visiting communities. So this was a community awareness project as well. We also targeted schools because the schools contain the future fishers of the region. So our GMA winners went to all the local schools, and we started this pilot in Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which are relatively small islands. And one of the great things about using these Gladden Memorial Award winners is that we are capitalizing on their authority as respected leaders within their communities. And they're not only helping to educate, but they're also helping to build capacity. Next, please, Joel. And so some of the lessons learned from our work with our two Gladden Memorial Award winners. So you would have had Cecil Marquez on the previous slide, who's from Grenada, and here on the right, we have Winsbit Harry from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And some of the important lessons we learned from this is that there is great value in peer-to-peer interactions. Not only did we have the opportunity where Winsbit and Cecil, they were able to meet during their campaigns, but they're also able to have peer-to-peer interactions with other fishers in their communities. And using these GMA winners had that level of confidence and trust amongst local fishers. We've found that there is that value in using local champions because the fishers there see them as an example and they're more trusting of those individuals as compared to a foreigner that may come in. And it also improved the probability of there being candid conversations rather than if a foreigner would have gone in, they would say the things that they think the foreigner wants them to hear. And it also allowed for there to be exchange of information as well as experiences. Another sort of lesson that we learned from this is that although there are very established best practices related to anything to do with the profit disposal, what we found is that the lack of these facilities within the Caribbean tends to be a major obstacle. So we have the fishers, so we are doing the education and awareness work, and the fishers are excited, they are interested, they recognize the need for profit disposal. And then what's happening is that they then don't have those facilities available for them. And so it's a sort of disconnect in that process. Currently, with additional funding now from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, we are expanding this program to St. Lucia, as well as Antigua and Barbuda. And in St. Lucia, we are actually using a woman fisher as our fisher champion to conduct this work. And another next step for us is that we've used the information that we've gathered from the regional action plan to target towards fishers. The next target group that we're focusing on is those of policy and decision makers. Joel, I think that's the end for me. So next slide. So yes, thank you everyone. And I'd be happy to take questions later on or share more information. So thank you.
Thanks, Fadila. I've actually just been communicating with, we had one other who was going to present here, Alan Pontine, the Chief Fisheries Officer for the Government of Montserrat. He's had a little bit of trouble connecting, so I've been trying to troubleshoot that in the background. So maybe what I might do is maybe open it up to questions now while I try to figure that out. And so if anyone has any questions for Fadila on any of that work, now would be a good time while I try to make sure that Alan can connect to talk about his work in Montserrat as well. So do we have any questions for Fadila?
You can indicate by using the reactions button and doing a raised hand. If anyone has any questions, either for me or even from Joel's introductory work too, I'd be happy to take them now.
Looks like we answered everybody's questions, Fadila.
Joel, if you want, you can continue and I can connect with Alan and troubleshoot with him.
Okay, sure. And I'm fine to, like, we can obviously, if we have to put that piece in later on in the webinar, that's totally fine as well. So we are a little bit ahead of time, so that's good. We can do that. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for that. The next piece of the presentation will be talking about the regional action plan we were talking about. I had planned to go through this fairly quickly, but I'm hoping that there will be some thoughts or questions on this from those in the audience. So I'll give an overview of what this actually was. So when we're developing a regional action plan or a national action plan or any type of action plan for a specific geography, or geopolitical entity, if it's a country, for example, then what we're looking at doing is creating something that would be useful for that particular region. I think that goes without saying, but that's really what we're trying to do. I mentioned our best practice frameworks for the management of fishing gear and aquaculture gear earlier. Those documents, while they're comprehensive and they're, quite significant documents, they are also at a very high level. So think of it as a 10,000 foot level of what you're looking at in terms of best practice recommendations. So each of those documents goes through sort of a background and an overview of why this is an important thing on the global stage. There's a risk assessment for specific gear types in there that goes, again, from a very general perspective of the likelihood of those gear types being lost and then their impacts being lost, and then you multiply those scores together to get a relative risk assessment for the gear types that are gear classes, I should say, that are included within the best practice framework, and I'll go into which those are in just a few minutes. But the idea is to give an overall risk assessment at a global level, and then it provides a series of recommendations tailored to specific stakeholder groups that might be interested in this particular issue. For example, fishers and vessel operators is one, fisheries managers is another, seafood certification bodies is another, seafood companies, so folks that have vessels and operate companies that have vessels that are actively fishing, retailers, seafood certification programs, gear manufacturers. So there's a very wide range of stakeholder groups that all have targeted specific actions for them. But again, this is a global context. So what we do is we take the recommendations based in that document, look at which stakeholder groups are we actually trying to reach with this action plan or this regional action plan, and then distill those recommendations down, and then use what we've learned from the previous engagement through the webinars, through the workshops that we've done, the surveys and questionnaires, and try to bring that local context, what is going to work in a local environment and what might not, and then tailor that specifically to the creation of a very specific regional action plan for that particular geography. What we typically do is we will draft that action plan using a lot of the information that we've got based on the GGGI CBPF, or the best practice framework for the management of fishing gear, as opposed to the ABPF, which is the aquaculture version. And then we do a round of stakeholder engagement to try to get some feedback from the stakeholders who are addressed. So again, there are about 12 different stakeholder groups that are identified with specific recommendations for prevention, mitigation, and remediation in the best practice frameworks themselves. But then when we're doing a regional action plan, we might look at who amongst those stakeholder groups would we focus on for the regional action plan. For the fishery, or for the Caribbean one rather, we did fishers, fisheries managers and co-ops as well, because their fisheries co-ops are a big important group within the region that we want to make sure that we were addressing. And then what we do is we go back to those stakeholder groups who are identified and who we're really targeting in the regional action plan in terms of recommendations. And then we go back to them for stakeholder engagement as well, try to get representations from them, get feedback on the draft action plan. So it's not a one-way street at all. It's an iterative process, and we want to make sure that we're taking our recommendations that we have based on the feedback that we've gathered from those in the region, and actually giving that to the people that are in the region that have a say in it, and say, okay, does this make sense to you? Is there something that we've missed? Is there something that we should be considering as well that wasn't captured in our initial engagement? And then there will be a back and forth process about incorporating those into the document. And then having a final output that incorporates that feedback. And again, I don't think that we would ever consider it to be final. There will be, of course, our best practice frameworks will change and evolve over time as new information comes to light, as new technology comes forth. And it will be the same thing with these regional action plans. We would think that once they're incorporated and adopted, that they can be further updated over time. But that's the general process for creating an ALDFG action plan for a specific geography. So again, that stakeholder engagement and feedback is critical. We need to make sure that we're getting local feedback into there, otherwise it's just not going to be as useful as it can be. And again, I think that's the distinction between the best practice frameworks as they are, as the 10,000 foot overviews, versus these actual tailored documents. And again, for this particular action plan, these are the groups that were involved that created the final action plan as it sits right now. And to give an idea of what that looks like, oh yes, oh, hang on, I think. Oh, sorry, one of those slides was out of order. That's my fault. Apologies for that. This is what the risk assessment sort of looks like. So again, we have a risk assessment from very low to very high in terms of the gear classes. And the gear classes that we are looking at within the Caribbean are gill nets, fish aggregating devices, traps and pots, long lines, bottom trawl, hook and line, midwater trawl, and seine nets. I know obviously there is a different weighting in terms of the proportion of fisheries that happen within the Caribbean across all of those different gear types. We wanted to make sure it was as comprehensive as possible, which is where we came from with this. The idea that to include all of these is just to make sure that, again, it's a very diverse region, and we'll get into that in just a moment as well. To ensure that we're covering everything that needs to be covered. And again, it's never going to be perfect. The Caribbean is such a diverse region that one of the challenges that we ran into was trying to come up with something that is regionally specific, but also takes all of the different countries into account. It's very difficult to do because every country is different. So some of the regional challenges that we had, or sorry, hang on a minute. Sorry. So this, sorry for the slide order there this morning. I was making a few changes this morning and obviously got a couple of these things mixed up. But in the regional action plan, section 1 is the background and rationale, which also goes over an overview of Caribbean fisheries and why this is important. And then the rationale for the regional action plan, which I've just gone through now. And then the gear class and risk assessments that we talked about. And the stakeholder groups, which I mentioned earlier, were fishers and vessel operators, fisher organizations, so we're thinking fisher cooperatives specifically, given their prevalence in the region, and fisheries managers and regulators, so government operators for the most part. And then we also wanted to make sure that whatever recommendations we're giving are realistic, that they're geared toward, especially those geared towards fishers, that they're simple, that they're pragmatic, and that they're affordable. Because that's another thing we, discovered in our engagement, is that you need to make sure, and this is not unique to the Caribbean region at all, but it is certainly prevalent, that we need to make sure that whatever recommendations are there are actually things that the local fishers are going to be able to include. There's no sense including fancy, really expensive technologies if that's just not something that's going to be effective for the fisheries in question. So we want to make sure that the recommendations contained therein were very tailored and specific. And while we were doing this, we ran into some regional challenges in the Caribbean. And this is by no means an extensive list, but these are some of the things that rose to the surface when we were developing that action plan. First is that one of the main challenges in the region, obviously severe weather. Severe weather has been a challenge in the Caribbean for a very long time, but accelerating climate change has made this even worse. Last few years, as most people will be aware, certainly those from the region will be aware, we have run out of letters for named storms that come into the Caribbean, and have had to actually reset the alphabet for the first time. This is definitely something that is causing a large amount of gear loss, and it's not just the gear loss, but it's also the threat to safety of life at sea. And in some of our engagement, particularly in Jamaica, where some fishers have to go very far offshore in order to successfully harvest the species, specifically spiny lobster. In some cases, they go quite far offshore. Then you might be out of cell phone range. You might not get a weather warning, and so it's not just about the gear loss. It's also about the considerations for safety of life at sea when it comes to severe weather. There's a lack of centralized policies on ALDFG, and again, this is not unique to the Caribbean. It is a finding, but it is by no means unique. Very rarely do you find centralized policies that take ALDFG or ghost gear into consideration. There was a lack of that in the Caribbean, but there's a lack of that just about everywhere. This is one of the reasons that we wanted to put the regional action plan together. Because again, the Caribbean, very geopolitically highly complex. There's 35 countries, 27 island states, some of which are overseas territories. The political landscape is actually quite complex. And of course, the capabilities and the fisheries management systems in place will vary significantly. So as much as the Caribbean looks like our neat little region potentially on a zoomed out map, it's not like that. It's very, very complex, and what works in one country is not necessarily going to work in another, and I'll get into that in just a second. So again, lack of centralized policies, and high variability in gear types and environments. So even when you're targeting the same species, we found, just as one example for spiny lobster, in Jamaica, they're using created as in hand built by the fishermen, Antillean Z traps to fish spiny lobster in sometimes quite deep water, whereas in Belize, they're fishing the same species, spiny lobster, but they're primarily doing it by dive, and they don't have those surface marker buoys for their traps because it's generally shallow water in an archipelago environment. Very, very different fishing or fishery in Belize than it is in Jamaica, even though they're targeting the same species with traps. Those traps will mean very different things. As I said, in Jamaica, the Antillean Z traps being handcrafted by the fishers with having to go to. So if they lose a trap, it's not about replacing the trap with an off-the-shelf product. They now need to go to a store, or maybe several different stores, to buy the pieces, whether that's the wood for the framing or the mesh for the trap's bait or body, and they have to put all that together. So it's not just about losing the trap and having to replace it. It's about the time that it takes, the expense and the time that it takes to go and put those together again. So it's a very different experience between two countries fishing the same species, just as an example. So again, that artisanal construction of gear, sometimes there's a lack of standardization. So it's not just about going to get an off-the-shelf product. This is a very specific circumstance. And when we are talking about end-of-life gear, and this is where we start getting into that discussion, there is a lack of recycling infrastructure in the Caribbean. This is, again, not unique to the Caribbean. Where I'm from, Western Canada, there was no recycling solution. When I mentioned the end-of-life solution or recycling program that I had created, I was having to ship that gear to Europe, and there's a carbon footprint associated with that. It was mostly as a proof that the material had value and that you could create a program like this. But we were operating in a harbor that had 45 acres of upland and 25 acres of waterlot, and really heavy lifting equipment and undercover facilities to process it all. That is by no means common. That is actually the exact opposite end of the spectrum. So you're going to find that even lack of processing facilities in harbors is going to vary hugely across geographies. So lack of collection systems in place, lack of recycling infrastructure, not unique to the Caribbean by any means, but certainly challenges when it comes to looking for end-of-life solutions, because when we're talking about trying to capture gear at the end of its life so that it doesn't end up as a vector to enter the ocean, you need collection facilities on hand, you need a distribution network, you need a lot of different things to make that happen, and that's just simply not possible. In the Caribbean was sort of the finding that we came up with. Including expensive inter-island transportation. Even if there was a facility on one island, getting the gear from one island to another is extremely expensive, carbon intensive. So it just, your typical, if I say typical recycling solution is just not going to happen in the Caribbean the same way that it might in other regions that have some little bit more of that infrastructure. But again, that infrastructure is still very rare. It's not everywhere. And we need to look at alternative solutions. And I think that that's why I'm really looking forward to our speakers that we have today, Lynette, Laura, Emmanuel, and Kendall, to talk about what they've been doing in terms of finding alternatives to this. So it's not just all about recycling. Again, recycling might be a perceived gold standard, but there are challenges with that as well, in that what happens to that product at the end of the day. It might be recycled into pellets, that those pellets get extruded into something, it gets put into another product of X, Y, or Z type, whether that's sunglasses or whatever, but what happens to that product at the end of the day? It's not always a circular path. It might just be a bump in a linear economy and then end up in a landfill as well. So recycling is a good thing, I think, for fishing gear, but it's not, I think, where it needs to be. So we're looking at alternative solutions where that recycling infrastructure doesn't exist and where those things are just not possible. So just a quick overview of the challenges that we encountered in the Caribbean. I'm going to pause there and just see if, first of all, if anybody has any questions about that, and then see if we have, I think I saw Alwyn join, so we might be able to have him do a presentation as well. Fadila?
Yes, Alwyn has joined, and I have a copy of his presentation and I can share it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, then maybe let's jump into that, and then we'll do questions after that to make best use of everyone's time. I'll stop my screen share now.
And where did Alwyn go?
Sorry.
Oh, here we go. Alwyn, great.
Good morning, everyone, and I must say thanks to the team for inviting me to share some of our experiences before in Montreal. And if you can go back to you hear me? Okay, so thanks again, everyone, and I know Joel, you've been the presentation is excellent, and it basically mirrors exactly what we are doing in Montserrat. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So it's, as it relates to ALDFG, we're transforming the challenges of that into socioeconomic opportunities. And as you spoke before, when we have derelict gears or gears that provide damage to the marine environment, it creates, in the future, it will create issues for us. So I'm looking at embracing the predictive modeling to develop, which was done for Montreal, to develop an adaptive action plan to eliminate ALDFG. So it's case study, UK Overseas Territories of Montreal. Next slide. So so this is just basically indicating what I'll be presenting briefly, and questions at the end, because I know I only have 10 minutes to make this presentation, so we can move on to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know me or who know me, well, I'm the director of Fisheries and Oceans, and I am the technical advisor to Government of Montreal on all ocean related issues. I have been working with government of Montreal for now 33.5 years, but however, I like to say previously to that, I was an air traffic controller and I was head of air traffic services and meteorology. And then I was transferred to the Fisheries and Ocean Governance Unit to help assist the government in improving the management of the resources. And I think this is one of the collaboration that we have actually made with GGGI and other development partners as it relates to addressing ocean pollution and management. Next slide. So as you can see, this is Montserrat from the air, and not only pollution, but as you can realize, we have an active volcano, which has somewhat been dormant for the past couple of, well, inactive for some while, but not only we have issues of ghost gear fishing, we also have issues as relates to volcanic activities, which are actually damaging our reef and other habitat. So yes, we are lush mountainous, as you can see. We are self-governing, but we are part of the UK. We have 102 square kilometers of coastline, which is rough and rugged. And I know that Joel was talking about some of the challenges you have in the region, and for Montserrat, because we are volcanic, our slope drops off very, very easily. So within a mile or 2 miles, you can find yourself at a depth of about 1,000 feet. So this has created some issues with us and challenges as it relates to ghost gear. Yes, we are party to the UN Convention, and that is the Bible of the ocean, and this is why we're trying to use some of the challenges that we have and turn into opportunities. Next slide, please. So as you can see, I just put a map of the Caribbean because I know this project will be that is being developed. It will be going through the wider Caribbean region. As you can see, where Montserrat is smack bang within the island, just south of west of Antigua and east of Guadeloupe. So that is where we are. Just to give you a concept of the wider Caribbean, where we actually sit. And we're working with GGI and GGGI and other agencies to address some of these challenges as it relates to the oceans. Next. So again, Montserrat, as an overseas territory, we are not only overseas territory of the UK, but we are full member of CARICOM and a full member of OASIS, and this is all within the remit of the revised Treaty of Bastia and the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. And I know I am one of the executive members of the CRFM Forum, and I know just a few days ago we were discussing how we can engage our other regional partners to embrace and adopt what the project going forward with GGI. Next slide. So some of the challenges that we have with the issues, we have inadequate institutional framework, increasing negative impacts of climate change, and as you can see, Pacific sagas in seaweed, and you can see with climate change, as Joel was speaking about, limited ocean education. Persons are using the ocean, but we do not have that capacity. That's one of the challenges that we find. And even with our fishers within Montserrat, one of the things we find is that 70% of the fishers, through the survey that we did through the project, they are old school, as you will call it. But not only old school, it's all about adapting to change. Some of the other issues that we actually have is that I mentioned about volcanic activity, and we probably might be the only Caribbean country in the next 100 years to be exporting sand, but we are extracting sand, mining sand to export to the different islands for various uses. But then we're having some challenges with the barges and stuff that are cutting, or marine traffic that are destroying some of the traps, or getting gears lost. But Joel, one of the things I would say, I'm happy to share this presentation with the rest of the audience as we move forward, just for time. Next slide. So case study Montserrat, one of the things that we want to actually do is we wanted to get assistance from what we call our development partners. And I can say in 2017, I think, Joel, when we had our CRFM Fisheries Forum meeting in Montserrat, you were on island and you met our ministers, and they basically embraced what was happening. In 2018, we did sign that agreement, that letter of support to say that we're going to be doing what we need to do. And the whole idea behind this is we want to restore the health of the ocean, and we want to turn the challenges, and we see these as challenges, but then we want to take it into an opportunity, and then implementing an adaptive roadmap, which we are in the process of doing. And as you can see, this is one of our fishes going to see. This, as you spoke about the Antillean Z traps, these are 4 traps that are on a boat with a material that is plastic also. And this is just in the harbor where the fishes are. So they were going to set their traps. How many of these are lost? We have recognized how much have been lost. Sometimes 200-300 per year due to adverse weather conditions and other human impacts. Next slide. So I think I basically said this before, but we had to identify priorities, because if you don't have priorities, we will just be running around. And we have developed developing institutional capacity, not only with staff within the ministry, but with our stakeholders. We're looking at legislative reforms, which is in the process, because with legislative reform, we are trying to adapt some of the best practice in fisheries management, or with GoScale, into our legislative framework. And I'll go across to sustainable financing to support project development. And I know that this project, as it relates to getting to addressing the GoScale or abandoned gear initiative, you have to have sustainable finances. And this was where through Nature Conservancy and GGGI and Government of Canada, we were able to put up a small project together last year, which has resulted in a document being put forward to us. Next slide. And again, the improved data collection system. When I spoke about improved data collection system, because that is one of our key goals, because you cannot make decisions unless you have accredited data. And this is where we're emphasizing that our data collectors, or even using technology to know exactly where the gears may be lost, and getting the data collectors to know exactly how many gears are being used in the water, when and what time, so that we can make sound decision making going forward as a fisheries manager. Next slide. And I think I repeat myself again. We build partnership, and one of the things I talk about partnership, I believe in building accredited partnership, because I working with GGI, Nature Conservancy, I find them to be a credible organization, because there are many persons or many institutions will come and say, we can do this, we can do that, but at the end of the day is probably to benefit themselves. But Montserrat being a part of the wider Caribbean and region, and we share resources, I always believe in accredited development partners. And I repeated what I said before. We signed the document, we had the predictive modeling through the project, and we got sustainable financing. Next. And again, just to see how our development partners work, and can see who they are. And I always remember our local fishers stakeholders, because if it wasn't for them, we would not have been able to get the information. Sometimes it's hard to get it from them, but it's only how you do things. CRFM, OECS Commission, we are working together in collaboratively moving forward, because all of us, the authority, which are the ministers of fisheries throughout the region, they are the actual ones who actually will be making the decision on the advice of us, the technical, the technicians. Next slide. Again, next slide. So, basically, these are the boats that we actually use. I think within the region, we use the same similar boats. And one of the things that we are actually doing, or we have been doing since 2014, is using VMS. So we have now 23 vessels that have VMS system. It's live. So when the different gears that we're using, when the fishes go to sea, I'm able to see exactly where the fishes are fishing, and you can tell whether or not they're doing traps, they're doing beat seine, they're doing gill net, or even line fishing. And this would help us to determine if pots are lost, because more likely than not, the pots will get lost more often, but we'll be able to identify. So even putting another project together where we can now start identifying the areas and then getting divers to go down and retrieve the trap cells. Next slide. Sorry if I'm moving too fast, but I rather hear questions. So as you can see, this is just a screenshot of how we are monitoring the vessels. So it's 24/7, and you can see some of the boats where they are. The clouded dot with the on land is where the boats actually are. But this is activities that are actually happening around the island. And as one of the things you can see is that as you come down to the south coast of Montreal, beyond Plymouth, you're realizing that the docks, the lines are close to shore, because any further out, you're going into what we call the abyss. So it gives you an actual idea of the coastline. So we're using a VMS to address some of these issues. Next slide. And this is just basically what we're actually using Pelagic data system. Next slide. And the other thing that we're doing also is BROWS, Baited Remote Underwater Visual System. It's a project, again, through the UK government, funded by the UK government. So if a fisher indicate to us that, so the whole idea with this project was to basically see exactly what your habitat is. But with this project, we can also use this camera to go and drop to see if we can locate the traps. Once you locate the traps, everything is actually mapped, and divers can actually go and do what they need to do. So you see this Caribbean spiny lobster, and all of that you're seeing there. You're seeing the reef, you're seeing fish in the background, but all of that is volcanic sediment. Seagrass. So this is what we're using technology to help address the issue going forward. Next slide. And this is just basically showing our 7-point plan to improve ocean governance. And with ocean governance, is whatever happens at land end up into the sea, and human activities on land and in the ocean would affect. But so this is our strategy going forward, and it's based on the UNCLOS and the United Nations the UN Sustainable Goals. Next slide. And again, to date, progress to date, we're updating national legislation, adapting and applying new technology. As I said, we did the split predictive modeling through Nature Conservancy, GGGI, and the consultant who came on board. And we are now getting information that we need to help advance, improve ocean governance. Next slide. And I will say this, in order to move forward, one of the things I will say, we need to engage the youth, because I normally say that I am on my way out, or with all these years of experience. I can only share the knowledge. And yes, we're sharing the knowledge with the youth. So this is someone who is actually moving forward to the next step as it relates to ocean governance. I would say, yes, it's my daughter. She's following in my footsteps, but this is where we need to use the knowledge that we have and embrace and engage the youth to assist us, because we as the older persons within the fraternity of ocean governance and management, we would not be here forever, but we need to just get it into the education system. And next slide. Thanks. Any questions? And thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Alan. That was great. We are quite actually significantly ahead of time right now, so we do have time for questions and discussion, which is a good thing. That's what I wanted to do. So if anybody has any questions for Alan, I also see we have a couple of questions that have been posted in the chat that I will answer in a moment. But if anybody has any questions specifically for Alan on the work that he's been doing there, would love to hear them. Oh, I see we have a hand up from Laura.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate your presentation, and I was just curious about the equipment that was visible in one of your slides, the BRUV, and it looks like it has 4 legs. And I wondered, does that something that sets down with a camera? Is it like a drop camera? I wasn't quite sure what it was. It looks pretty interesting.
So yeah, it's a project that is going on within the overseas territory funded by HMG's government. And so it's a system that you can do. So it has multi-functions. So we're using GoPros, and they have legs. So when you want to do anything as relates to the benthics, we get it, we send it down, and it sits on the ocean floor. And every hour we'll retrieve and do what we need to do. However, we can take the legs off, and then we have the capability to use a 1 mile long string with 6 different cameras. So we see the midwater, what is happening in your midwater, and we can refit it to go on the seabed and see exactly what is happening.
So it can be towed, is that correct? You're also
we as it relates to towing, one of the things that is not very recommended as it tows, the resolution is not going to be good. So what we do is that we'll drop it, and so when we drop 5 at one time, within an hour, we start retrieving back again, and then resetting, and then just moving within the transect that we want to do.
So are the vessels in your area outfitted with any bottom reading sonar, or is this sort of the only look at the benthic habitat that you
But
have?
as the fishers would, some fishers, not all, would have your fish finder, or just to give you an idea of what with fish and stuff. But these equipment are for research purposes. And then what we actually do is, I know I have access to the police vessel to go and do monitoring, but for most of the surveys that I've actually done so far, I've actually used the fishers to do it, so that I can get a better understanding. One of the things I forgot to say as it relates to the project that we did, most of the fishers, for as it relates to finances, they use the Clorox bottle, plastic bottles and stuff, and this creates some issues. So one of the things that we actually have just learned yesterday, I got some funding through a project through again HMG government, where we'll be testing some pop-up buoys. So sometimes when the fish traps get lost, or the main buoys are cut, what these will do, it will be able to, after a week in setting, you'll pop it up. So if you lose your main buoy, it pops up, And it's a company in Canada that we're working with. I think Joel, I think you know the company because we were in communication the other day, and they mentioned the work that you're doing. So it's we will be now trying to do some of this research to help to improve and improve what we're doing as relates to lost species.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, and yeah, I think there's another organization, the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation in Rhode Island, who's been doing some work with dropping GoPros to look for ALDFG specifically. So seems sort of related to that project. And one quick question I had for you, Alwyn, was when you say you set it on the ocean floor, is it like in any way, like do those legs actually penetrate the substrate? And the reason I ask is because I would imagine they would just get sort of tossed around by the current if there wasn't anything sort of anchoring them there.
So on the legs we have weights that hold them on the seabed, but again with the ocean current, it will move. It will actually move them around, and mindful of the fact that of the coral reefs and stuff, they sometimes when you drop them and you retrieve them and you look at the data, the camera is pointing down or the camera is pointing up. And one of the things, one of the issues that we actually have also within the region is that with the stony coral disease. So even if we're doing that, when we bring it back on board, we have to clean the legs and stuff to ensure that we don't spread the diseases and stuff. So it's a lot of work and research that is doing, but all this information will be documented going forward to help what we're doing actually in the region.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. No, that makes sense. Does anybody have any other questions for Alwyn?
Yes, good day. My name is Diana from Dominica Fisheries. I heard him spoke about some buoys for the fish pots. Can you explain that a little bit for me, please?
Okay, and I'm happy that Dominica is on board with this. I know the meeting that we had with I was just looking for the name of the company. I know the meeting that we had with the development partners, and I know a representative from Dominica was online, and I know that Peter Murray, CRFM was online also, and St. Lucia was online. So what is happening is that it is like, how should I put it? I can share the documentation for you through Joel, but basically you're putting a device on the fish trap. You're not cutting any wires or anything. You'll be using ties to tie it on. It's electronically set so that if you're going to be setting it for a week, you know, sometimes the fishes cannot get out. If they say they're going to set up a trap for a week based on the weather condition within the region, there's some days that you cannot get to sea. So if you set it, once it's 7 days or 72 hours or 48 hours reaches, it deploys the buoy to the top. When you bring the trap up, it resets itself and you put it back down. And I know this is being done in Jamaica. They've been tested in Jamaica and also Belize at the current moment. So I know Montserrat would actually be next, because I said I just got confirmation that I should be trying out 30 of them. They're expensive, and this is where, as it relates to Ghost Gear initiative and as it relates to retrieving gears, it's as about sustainable financing, because one of these gears costs, I think it's 100 US. But when you look at the benefit of it, it outweighs the loss. But for us, what we decided to do, we are going to introduce it to the fishers at a project expense, and then going forward, we will know what to do going forward. But I can share, Joan, I can actually share that information with you that you can pass on. But I know for a fact there was a team member from Dominica who was online with us. The other thing that I would like to share is also, Joel, which I think you have the copy of the report from the consultants who did work here in Montreal. So I am happy to authorization to share with the team members that are actually online.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, the company is called Rescue Unit. That's the same company I think I presented on one of my slides earlier. And that's the company that Alan's referring to that is doing those electronic time release buoys. And it's actually really good to hear your perspective on that, Alan, because the ones that we tested in Jamaica initially were the cotton rot cord version, which didn't have any electronic components, so they were significantly cheaper. But again, they didn't work as well for the fishery. The fishers said, well, we're only deploying for a couple of days. If it takes 90 days for that rock cord to come apart to prevent ghost fishing and the buoy pops up, then that's not going to work for our fishery. So they actually identified that the electronic released versions, where you can set the time, the length of time from like anywhere from an hour to however many days or weeks you want it to be out there, depending on your needs, was beneficial for them. But the cost is a barrier to entry. And one thing I will point out is that, well, two things. One, when the GGGI has been doing projects like this, like we did in Jamaica, you know, those devices were purchased through the grant funding that made those projects possible. And then we passed them off onto the Jamaica National Fisheries Authority to distribute as they see fit. So the fishers at the end of the day will end up with those units to continue to use them at no cost to them, at least for the initial go around. And I think that it's also important to mention that the more of these trials that can be done, and the more that this gear type of technology takes off and gets adopted and is shown to be valuable, then the larger the production scale can be, and the more the cost will come down overall. So when you're piloting these sort of new technologies, I think that's really important. And one of the reasons we want to do it, even on small scale, is the more of these case studies where it actually is working and suiting the needs of the fishers, then obviously the adoption rate should go up, which means that production should be able to go up in the longer term, and cost should be able to come down as you sort of approach those economies of scale.
And right, and as we speak on that, I know that for the next CRFM forum meeting, that the issue with as it relates to GGI and that signing of the document by member states is on the card. And I know a decision that was taken that it will be introduced, these pop-up buoys will be introduced to the rest of the forum going forward. One of the things, as I said, Dominic was online, CRFM, which was Peter was online, and St. Lucia. And the issue, because I think presently they're looking at the 150 feet depth of water. But what we're saying is that in some of the islands, let's say like Antigua, Anguilla, Turks and Caicos, Bermuda, some of these shallow, it can work there. But for us, where we're looking at, because my fishers are fishing in depths of 300 feet and out. So these are some of the things that we said that needs to be taken on board, and the company, the development partners saw it as important. So even with our trial that we'll be doing, for what I'll be doing is that I'll be targeting not all the fishers, but at least 5 fishers who I can actually work with. I think this is some of the successes that we have had here in Montreal as trial is not to get everybody involved. You work with just a few, and then we can move on. With IVM assistant persons may ask how I can get so many fishers with that. I started off with 2. I started off with my uncle who I go to see with, and I started off with a friend. And the persons realize the benefit of it. Everybody wants. So we will be we're doing a test trial later in the year once the equipment arrive on island. And I'll be working with 5 fishers maximum. And then as we see the success, reports will be written and can be shared to the rest of the region. But it's going to be costly, and these are some of the things that I from my standpoint as a technician, is to ask my colleagues within the region, to ask your ministers of government to support us with this and support the CRFM with the step that we're moving forward with GGGI.
Thank you very much, Alan. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're looking at an MOU and a potential recommendation to CARICOM as well in terms of best practice recommendations that would make sense for the islands. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that it illustrates the point as well that even a small pilot project, you start with 2 or 3, and then you can move forward and make sure that once people understand the value of this and that they're getting something out of it, then you scale up from there. And I think that's the way that we've been working within the GGGI for many years, is just to, you start off small and then you move on to a phase 1, 2, 3, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm glad to know that that is the optimal path, and that has worked for you in the past as well. So thank you for that. I see we have one other hand up, Diana.
Hi, yes, just replying to Alwyn's comment that he made about the equipment that they're going to be using. I think that is a very good initiative, because here in Dominica, we have been working on asking fishers to use biodegradable panels on their fish pots, like when they get lost, at least the fish can get out of the traps. But this method that I'm speaking about will be actually allow you to retrieve the fish pot from the ocean, which is good. It sounds good to me.
And thanks very much. I know that Dominica, I think I'm seeing Norman's.
Hello.
Yeah, I know that Dominica has done before. But one of the things that with this, the good thing about this, why I am so interested and so enthused of supporting it, is that if you have the biodegradable material and probably within 3 to 5 months, it degrades, it gives the fisher that opportunity to retrieve the trap again. Because if it pops up, and Joel spoke about the strength of the cord, and that was one of our issues in discussing with the team. But if, yes, your fish trap get lost, but then you have an opportunity within a week or 2 weeks for it to probably resurface. Because there's sometimes, I know fishers here cannot go to sea for 6 weeks. And then when the currents are hard, you can't see the pot, but you go out one day, and when you see it, everything is just floating on the water. So it's another way of us. And thanks, and I look forward for your support with this through the CRFM network.
Perfect. Thank you. That's excellent feedback. And thank you again for the comment as well, Shalene, because Shalene, for those of you who don't know, is from the Jamaica National Fisheries Authority, and who we've been working with on the ground to do those trials in Jamaica, and we'll be testing with her team on the ground in the coming months to test the electronic released versions there as well. I see we have another question. Norman has his hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, morning everybody. I missed quite a bit of the presentations, and I just came back on and heard Mr. Pontin from Montserrat talking about the pop-up and the sonar, the sensors. Can you set it for 5 to 7 days, or if it's a fixed date? What if you decide, for example, there are some fishers on the East Coast who may probably want to raise the pots after 3 days, you know? If you have a sensor that you can time it, but what if you change your mind, or what if for some reason you decide to extend the time beyond that? And also, I'm very much interested in the work that Montserrat has done. I'm from Dominica. I'm a former fisheries officer. We have done some work, and I'm hearing Diana giving excellent representation to us there. And I really would be interested in reading some of the material that you all have produced out of Montserrat, and see how Dominica can continue to participate in that, because we're a team, and it would be good if we can work together to work this out. So Mr. Pontin, I would really appreciate getting some of that information and seeing how that could probably help Dominica. And Diana mentioned a good point about the biodegradable material. It actually complements the work, because even if the pot is damaged, or lost, it can still sometimes continue to catch fish. So with the biodegradable material, it can reduce that time factor and make a difference. Thanks, Pontin.
Okay, and thanks, Norman. And I know you're very instrumental behind the biodegradable material. So what I will do, I would and because it's a regional approach, and I'm mindful of the fact that Peter Murray, who is the development officer in CRFM, what I will do after this meeting, I will communicate with him and ask him to share with the member states the information that was sent by the company. Also,
does that have to be done by country, or I mean, I can reach Peter and make a humble request, or I have to do that through my government?
no,
Because like I said, I'm a farmer, so I'm not prime. So, but you know, that information is necessary, and I think what it does is is good. So that would be something that we can use and build on that if it's possible.
okay, I understand what my for consideration, Joel, what I will do, I have the information as it relates to the product design and everything that was shared with us. So what I will do, because I'm not going to have everybody's email with me, I can share the documentation with Joel, and then Joel can share with all the participants who are online today. And as I said before, I know that this information will be sent, is being sent probably as we speak via CRFM to the different member states. I know the politics stuff. So for consideration, Joel, if I share I will share the document with you, and then you can share it to everyone so they can see exactly what it's all about. I think that is probably easier.
Sure. And so on the 2 quick points, and then we have one more. I think we had one more question. I thought Empara had her hand raised, but that's okay.
I had also asked about the pop-up. If it's a 5 or 7 day pop-up,
Yes.
and somehow what if you change your mind, decide to shorten the soaking time of the gear?
Yeah, so in the electronic versions, there's actually an app that you can have for a smartphone, and you can program that to whatever you want. I think it's within hours, days, whatever you want. In terms of changing them once they've been deployed, I don't think that is possible. Because you'll need to have a connection from your phone to the unit, and I just through water at whatever depth you're going to be deploying, I don't know if that's possible. But I will also say that it's meant to be a supplementary buoy, so most of the time you will have your main buoy on the water anyway. It's the rescue unit device is meant to be used. So if that main buoy gets lost for whatever reason, then there's a way to retrieve your gear. It will pop up at a certain amount of time, and you know when to sort of go look for it. There has been talk, though, that in some fisheries within the Caribbean, one of the key causes for gear loss is actually theft. And so it's not everywhere, but it does happen. And it's, again, not unique to the Caribbean at all. But so there has been talk about using the rescue unit as the primary buoy so that you don't actually have a main buoy, and the rescue unit is the only one, effectively turning it into a quote-unquote ropeless trap for the time that it's deployed. That is something that certainly can be done. I don't know if it's been tested that way just yet, but I mean, in theory, it could work that way. But to answer the question, once it's been deployed, I think that it will have, like, as in put in the water and set, I think that you'll have to wait for it to come back up with whatever time frame you've initially set before you can actually change it. But then you can change it again to whatever you want to suit your fishing needs. I hope that answers the question, Norman.
Yeah, thanks much.
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide contact info for anybody who is interested in connecting with that organization or with us after the fact. Happy to do that. I'm mindful of time in that we are right on time and just about to start the presentations from our presenters. And I know that Lynette, you've been hanging out for a while now. You're first on the docket. So I think what we'll do is we'll move on to those presentations. But if anybody has any other questions, please keep them handy, and we will address them in the open discussion at the end. But very quickly, I did say that I would answer 2 of the questions in the chat very quickly. One from Mimi, who asked about, I attended a workshop held in the Florida Keys with a group from Net Your Problem hosted by the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. Do you work with them? I will say that the founder of Net Your Problem, Nicole Baker, is, I actually saw her here. Are you still here, Nicole? Yes, she is, who I know quite well. the answer is we don't work directly with Net Your Problem on any of our projects currently, but we are well aware, and we keep in communication with one another, very aware of the great work that they're doing as well. Nicole, in the interest of time, I would love to have you give a little bit, but I want to give a little bit of an answer to that, but maybe we'll save that for the discussion if that's okay, because I just want to be mindful of the fact that it's like 2 in the morning for our first presenter, Lynette, and I'd really like to get her on so that she can get some rest after this, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I can talk about whatever people are interested in at the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. And then the second question is from Alfonso. Is it desirable to have a technological tool such as an application for cell phones to map lost and abandoned fishing gear classified as marine litter? If it is desirable, what would be the greatest utility of that tool? Great question, Alfonso. As it happens, the GGGI has just such a tool. I mentioned our data portal very quickly earlier in my presentation, which is meant to be a way to bring in multiple data sets and multiple data sources from around the world together and display them on a map, so you can see where gear has been reported, with the understanding, of course, that where there is no data, it doesn't mean there's no gear loss. It just means we don't have access to data sets there yet. But one of the complementing pieces of that is our Ghost Gear Reporter app, which is freely available for Android and Apple devices through their respective storefronts. And we encourage people to download that and report gear loss, whether you're a fisher reporting gear loss when you lose a pot, or whether you're just a citizen scientist who happens to notice some gear on a beach or while you're out boating. To report that to the Ghost Gear Reporter app. I can provide a link to that to everyone after. And all of the data that goes from that in that portal that's recorded gets automatically, from the app gets automatically recorded into the portal. And again, the portal's whole purpose is to build this global picture of what does gear loss look like around the world. So anytime anybody uses that app, that's where it goes. And there is a way for data contained within the portal to be shared with other databases via an API connection as well. So the purpose is not to silo this data, but is to make sure that anything ALDFG related is in one place. And then if there are other databases out there that might like access to what is in the GGGI data portal for their own marine debris databases, for example, there's a way to have that as a two-way street as well. So I'll maybe leave that there. I hope that answers those two questions quickly. And Lynette, if you're ready, I can bring up your presentation right now.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, well, Lynette, please take it away.
Okay, thanks. So my name's Lynette Griffiths, and I represent a couple of organisations. One is Arab Arts, which is an arts organisation in the Torres Strait. So from Arab, which is the island, that's its traditional name. Its English name is Darnley Island. And also over that, we've formed another organisation called GhostNet Collective, which allows Indigenous and non-Indigenous people from Australia to work together in artistic forms for net, working with GhostNet. Next slide, please. So this is one of the artists from Arab Arts, and this is just just saying hello, basically. So the Torres Strait, all seafaring people, so small islands, all connected by waterways. So lots of the same, I guess, problems in issues about transportation and all of those sorts of concerns. So yeah, next slide. And that's the group there. So there we are with a large GhostNet turtle. This one, so made all from abandoned net and rope, which we pull apart. So I'll go through that process a little bit later. Okay, next slide. So where are we? Because, yeah, Australia's a big country, but the yellow dot right at the very top is the Torres Strait. So between the top of Queensland, which is the state that we're in, to New Guinea. So Ereb is up there, and then the Ghostnet Collective, myself in Cairns, which is the next yellow dot down, and the next dot down is another part of the Ghostnet Collective in Townsville, with Marion Gamers. And currently we're in Sydney, and we're about to install quite a massive Ghostnet sculptural project in Sydney. So I've put Sydney in there as well. Thanks. So in the Torres Strait, so that's just in the outlines there. That's Ereb, the island, and you can see Ereb in relation to Thursday Island, which is the administrative centre for the Torres Strait, and that's the top of Queensland there. So geographically much closer to New Guinea than Australia. Thanks. Most of our net, although it comes from many different places, a lot of it is Indonesian in origin, and it's drifting gill net, and that bottom slide there is representative of a single net. So they drift, obviously, for from different reasons. Drift into Australian waters and become massive problems. We had one retrieved net retrieval in Australia is a huge problem as well. They're dangerous, they're hard to pick up, they need heavy machinery, all of which in isolated communities is a very difficult thing to do. So the Navy picked one net off Darwin, which weighed 8 tons. So, we're looking at large amounts of net, very difficult to get around Australia and out to, the people who need it. Thank you. Yeah. So we're not just talking about making things, we're trying to create stories with culture and different people, bringing together different people to create different outcomes all over Australia. And we run workshops and we try and partner with different organisations, school groups, education, all of that sort of thing, to try and raise awareness. That's all we're doing, is raising awareness. We can't even begin to touch the problem, but we're putting it in a visual form. Thank you. So I just want to talk about the process, really, because what we do is we started making really small things in communities where people are used to handcrafts and things. So we were making small baskets and cushions, but clearly they don't earn a lot of money. So to bring money into it and to make that a little bit more viable for the community and to put money back into people's pockets, obviously we needed to go larger and bigger. So we started to create larger frames and infill. So that top left slide is currently a big stingray. We're about to install these now in Sydney. And there's be 11 of them in a very large display. So I'll go on to show you how they're infilled. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so this is part of the process underway. So that's me in my studio, but we had, lots of people come in and work with us, and we've used lighting to embed it in the ray as well. So we're just planning and working with the net there to work out what we can do. So next slide. And that's the finished piece. So every bit of that underneath is retrieved net and rope. So all pulled apart, all rewoven and stitched together, and then designed and stitched together to, create a colourful, I guess, display. And this was to reflect the coral and the ocean floor on the bottom of these rays. And so there is now 11 of those, and they will go up in this, really massive display. Next slide. We've tested them, so they will be hung at a height of about 8 meters. So yeah, quite high. and they'll swim across the skyline. So not only did we have problems of looking at them against the sky, we also had problems about how to, construct them as well. So yeah, next slide. These are just shots of, I guess, the process and just details. So we work trying to make components, and those components mean that individuals can make them in any place. So you see the little rays in the bottom. What we did was we did Zoom workshops all across Australia and to Canada, and instructed with instruction sheets and videos and on Zoom for other people to make these little stingrays. So they made little rays, and all of those rays are now stitched onto the big rays. So by doing that, we're creating a big community of makers and a big and people spreading the word, at a grassroots level. So it's not just sort of high end trying to bring everyone together, but it's that if you want to get involved, you can. And those education programs are very dear to my heart, as I was a teacher, and taking those further, but not just sending out kits of net, which is what people sort of want, but trying to encourage communities, coastal communities, to retrieve net as well. So that the net retrieval for us is I've been listening to your problems about net retrieval. It's a huge issue for us because Australia is a big country. But the logistics of getting the net, sorting the net, cleaning the net, and then making it usable are all costly with, sea miles and all sorts of stuff as well. So that the divide between making a beautiful product, creating that awareness, but getting that product from that retrieval stage is there's a big divide there for us, and it's quite a huge problem for us. Thanks. Next slide. So that's the underneath of a finished one, all around the group, all around, in my garden. So you just see the sort of scale of it, and that the underneath of that one represents the tide line, not just the animal, but where we're working in a space where the original tide line is now land, and so we wanted to represent that tide line. Thank you. Next slide. So this is the artist's impression of a render of how it will actually look in the square when it's done. So what we're doing is igniting it's a dark, desolate kind of space. So we're hoping that by igniting it for night traffic and lots of people going to walk through this space, that we can spread that word and we can raise that awareness even further. Thanks. And I'm just going to run through a few things that we've done previously. So we're a small community of makers, but our reach has been quite big. And that's why I think not making just bags and utilitarian objects, but creating artwork was important for us. This is in the main salon in Monaco. So this was one of the first big exhibitions. So, and it really shot us into stardom, basically, in terms of being on the international stage. So that was really important in that initial awareness, because obviously there's, millions of people go through this museum in a year. Okay, next slide. We've also exhibited, we have in Europe been big supporters. So this dolphin went to France, to a museum in France. So just kind of punching out way beyond the little island that we are, trying to get, a lot more exposure. Yeah, next slide. And we've done everything from make dinghies to the fish that you see, but everything that we do is related to the ocean. So we're trying to get the message that this net and menace, I guess, is from the ocean. We turn it into something beautiful, but it is about conservation. That's the bottom line. So everything in that dinghy is made out of net. Next slide. So yeah, quite impressive sort of installations in art shows. So that's a kind of a, you know, a modern interpretation of a traditional canoe, obviously, and how, you know, people journey across the ocean. So that whole piece with the birds and everything was about people connecting across the ocean. Next slide. This is a traditional fish trap, supersized. So this is what they call a werris, or a fish scoop, and with sardines, which is its traditional, what they catch traditionally. But this was about making it supersized in terms of looking at the fishing problem across the world being supersized by trawlers and things. So it was a take on something fairly traditional and supersizing that. So yeah. But the sardines, everybody contributed to those. I personally made 1,000 of them. But yeah, we had people from all over the world make those sardines and send them back. Thank you. And coming down then in size, quite often we make multiples to create, you know, you can have one object, but making modules or multiples of it is getting messages across. So it's one way that we can do it. We also do this this is really good in terms of workshops and education projects as well. So lots of communities can make things and it can come together. So it is about sharing, again, about bringing people together. Next slide. Oh, and this is a little movie. I'll leave you with this movie. So that little movie was a piece that we're entering in WOW, which is the World of Wearable Art. And every time we make something, we discover something new about the material that is quite dangerous. So that was using the actual fluorescence quality of the net and rope that we found, and under black light, obviously, but trying to create another worldly interpretation. So we're looking not only at the material, but at that future and what we can do with this stuff in the future. So we continue to make, and so from Arab and from Cairns and Townsville in Australia, I'd just like to thank everybody. You know, you're all doing such amazing work, and I just feel that if we can make that work visible in a way that interests people, we're also helping with this as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lynette. And again, thank you again for being here. So early, late. I mean, you're at the point where it doesn't really matter, right? One transitions into the other at that point. I really appreciate it. If anyone has a quick question or two for Lynette, we can probably do that. I want to try to keep to time, but I also want to be mindful, Lynette. I don't want to keep you to the very end, as you've been so gracious in presenting and staying up so late to do that. So does anybody have any specific questions for Lynette?
Hey, Joel, this is Laura.
Laura.
I want to take full advantage of Lynette while she's still awake and ask her a very specific question. The work that you make is incredibly beautiful. And I wonder if you have confronted that dilemma of making beautiful artwork from treacherous debris, and whether you have had any response from audiences about, oh, well, it's a good thing they have such a supply of this so they can make such beautiful things. And, you know, there's that tension there. And I wondered if you had encountered that.
Yeah, like, yes, it is, you know, like, here is a material, here is a very deadly material. We are making something beautiful. We are creating the awareness. What we do find with it is that because when we first started, it was just this net, you know, and I can't explain what it was. It made it, touching it and pulling it apart, it became a very different material to us all, you know, like it starts off, you go, oh my God, it's net. It's a big pile of net, you know, it arrives. You know, we collect it, we sort it, all sorts of stuff. And yes, that's the bit that you see it as very dangerous, and then people see it as beautiful. But we always have that message with it, that this is an incredibly deadly problem. And so a lot of the animals that we've used and we create are animals that are at risk from being, you know, caught in those nets, you know, stingrays in the shallows and things. So yes, people do, and we usually accompany exhibitions with video as well to explain the problem. Mm.
Yes, thank you. That was my next question. Thank you very much. Really wonderful work.
Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, my pleasure, Lynette. And thank you again so much for being with us here. And again, Lynette, I mean, your contact information is there. So if anybody has any questions for Lynette after the fact, when she's maybe at a more reasonable hour for her to reply, then you can contact her at that email there. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with that, I think we will move on to our next presenter, which is Laura from the Center for Coastal Studies.
Great, thank you, Joel. Yes, my name is Laura Ludwig, and that is a hard act to follow to discuss debris that can be used in artwork. Joel asked me to share some of the information with you regarding my program in the Northeast United States. My program is primarily removing ghost gear from the ocean, and I do work with commercial fishers, or fishermen as we call them, to do that. And I also do removals from shorelines of large scale marine debris, such as what you see in that image there, which is on the shore of an island in Massachusetts, which is in the Northeast. But we have systems in our part of the world that allow us to recycle a lot of the debris that we find. However, there's plenty of it that we cannot recycle. And that's what I'm going to sort of focus on here for this presentation. Next slide. I know that if there are any fishermen on this webinar, you might want to look, you might want to see what kind of vessels we work from, and that is a standard operating vessel in our area that works with the lobster fishery, which is Homarus americanus, and that is shown there on the left and in the center. And it's a highly lucrative fishery, so there are a lot of people doing it, and there are a lot of traps in the water at any given time, both commercial and non-commercial. Next slide, please. The fishery is comprised of gear that is primarily wire traps that are coated in polyvinyl chloride or PVC, and everything else is essentially plastic. And the images here just show a few of those pieces. I'm sure many of these things are familiar to you. But I wanted to highlight that it's not just net or rope that we're concerned with in ghost gear. It's also the small bits, at least for my program. And we do collect data on everything that we remove from the ocean. Next slide. The lobster fishery being the largest fishery, it's primarily what we see for ghost gear, but we do get a few nets, unlike the previous speaker who is in Net Central in the Torres Strait. We don't see a lot of ghost nets in our neck of the woods, in our area. And those that we do see tend to be pretty far and few between, and we have a number of fisheries that use nets that we do collect, such as the white net of a clam aquaculture operation. That's that lower right picture. We have dragger or trawl nets that are shown in the other two photos, and we also have steel cable that accompany the mobile fisheries in this area. The picture on the bottom left is simply a pile of soft goods, I call them, that we retrieved from the seabed during our ghost gear removal project. That was 2 or 3 days worth of effort in a very, very small area. Next slide. The scale of the debris that we find is pretty substantial. We've collected nearly 100 tons of debris over the past 6 projects. And the nets are some of the heaviest of those items because clearly they're wet and they're laden with all sorts of detritus and benthic material, and that can weigh them down even further, making them very difficult to handle. And I'm looking forward to having you meet Nicole later, and she will tell you as a professional net recycler that it is super hard to recycle this type of material. It is very, very dirty. It ruins equipment, and it is very unwieldy, hard to handle. Next slide. I had the opportunity to conduct a buyback program at one point when the federal fisheries agencies mandated a change in the type of rope that the lobster industry had to use. And we were funded to purchase over 2 million pounds of rope that was essentially in good condition. In fact, it was in excellent condition. We actually had calls from some of the island nations asking if they could have our rope because they heard about this program. But unfortunately, one of the criteria of the buyback was that it would not go back in the ocean. So we could not give it to aquaculturists or other types of fishing outfits. Instead, what we had to do is come up with a way to recycle it or use it over again. So half of that, just over 1 million pounds of this rope was recycled until, next slide, please. Oh, I'm going to get to that later. Sorry, I plugged these in differently. Sorry, I wanted to just say that, yeah, that's fine. Leave it there, leave it on this slide. Thanks, Joel. Until we did find more clever uses of it, but we were able to, of that 2 million pounds total, we were able to say that not one single bit of it was sent to an incineration plant or landfilled. Okay, now next slide shows a use for some of the trap gear that is often found. And we do have some folks in areas where there's a lot of volatility with the shoreline, where they will use the old traps as erosion control. So these were deliberately installed here, and they are actually stacked on top of one another so that they have been able to maintain some of that sandy barrier island habitat. However, I took this photo in October of 2021, so a year and a half ago, and in the storm of December this past year, they were all upended and removed from that area. So erosion control in very high energy areas may not be the best use, but in other less volatile or lower energy areas, this is a good mechanism for people to get rid of their old lobster traps. Next slide. And we are lucky to have a lot of creatives, as you just saw in the previous presentation, but I wanted to, these seem to be out of order, but that's my fault, not yours, Joel. And so this is, I'm sure you've seen these before. I believe this program was in the United States, was initiated about, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it's really expanded quite a bit, where the wire is used as a frame and then filled with material. And I could not find an example of fishing gear being used specifically in this application, but it occurs to me that it would be an excellent way to use wire lobster traps. Next slide. This is a very sort of minimal version of what you saw in the video that Lynette left us with. There is quite an interesting world out there of people creating wearable art with fishing gear. And next slide. Yeah, these are really out of order. It's too bad. It was a really great presentation, but I did it late last night, and sorry about that. This is another output that we've had in our using rope from the fishery, where a fellow in Florida is making fly swatters. I think they're supposed to resemble ponytails. Next slide. So earlier I mentioned that we had 1 million pounds of this floating ground line that we were able to divert from the waste stream. And these are some examples of the products that were made from them. I'm sure you've all seen these before. Next slide. And once that regulation went into play and all the fishermen changed their rope out to the required rope, we had another problem on our hands, because the rope that they were mandated to use was now falling apart and becoming weaker, and they had to replace it a lot more frequently. But I was able to partner with an artist who wanted that exact rope for her work. And all of these slides represent rope used by one artist, which I kind of will feature a couple times in the rest of the slides here, where she would crochet the rope into these long runners, which you see stacked on the top right there. And then she would paint them all a uniform color. Next slide. Her first installation was a series of red painted runners of rope. And this sort of created notoriety for her work, and she has been busy ever since. This was in 2009. Next slide. She's gone on to many different locations, reprising, sometimes using the same exact rope that she used originally, but then painting it a different color and creating different sculptures. And this was an installation in Texas. Next slide. Other types of material that we handle is a net that is actually looking for a final resting place. And we intercepted this. This is working with the Gulf of Maine Lobster Foundation. The net, as you saw in a previous presentation, can be quite extensive. And I believe this was from the midwater trawl fishery. And then artists are super interested in certain of the panels. Next slide. And they were able to bring a sharp knife and cut it all up and retrieve it, and then create installations by working again with the community of hundreds of people actually working together, similar to what Lynette was describing. But for one person to do all this is super amount of work. So clearly more hands make easier work. I am not an artist and I do not participate in any of these. I'm just sharing with you the results of where some of this has landed. Next slide. This is a different artist working with rope that as you can see, I've got a photo on the right that shows the polypropylene or the nylon that's sort of like set aside, and she prefers to not work with that because it doesn't hold the dyes that she prefers to use. Next slide. And then this artist will create three-dimensional or two-dimensional installations such as these, which sell for many, many dollars. Next slide. She's represented in a gallery in Provincetown here, and uses and prefers to use, you know, certain types of nylon that hold the dyes that she creates. And she calls this humane taxidermy, where she is telling a story with the materials, not necessarily with animals that may have been entangled in it, but simply showing that conflict between man-made and natural. Next slide. Again, more of the debris that's super hard to do anything with can be useful. The artist on the right came and helped me with my program 2 years ago, and helped, you know, basically we woman handled all of the debris for that project and loaded up a trailer. Next slide. And she was able to use traps and net in this installation that was commissioned to sort of, it's a multimedia presentation with light and humpback whale music sounds, basically just recordings of humpbacks, and each of them was synced up with a light show. So it was a pretty spectacular event, and that has now been on the road. She's shown it as 3 different locations, and Joel, this is the installation that may be going to Baja California next. Next slide. These are, I just wanted to show that the smaller scale items can also become a very legitimate end use for these materials. These are 2 artists who found my program recently and said, we heard you have a lot of junk lying around. Can we come have it? And next slide. They collaborate on their works, and they're typically very textural wall hangings. And I cannot believe the beauty that these people are getting from this really disgusting material. Next slide. Another artist likes to work with the small, harder plastics. These are all the debris items that I've collected on cleanups and we've documented in our database, and I keep them specifically for use by creative people. Next slide. And then freely give them away. And this woman likes to use the smaller things in collage type representation, and fishing gear is pretty front and foremost in her work, where on the left you'll see actually an ID tag along with a couple of nets, and then the right image is a close-up of a probably a 16-inch, or I don't know what that is in metrics, sorry, square frame of just lobster trap tags, ID tags. Next slide. And of course, the weaving continues. There's many people that I give my materials to so that they can make these products. Next slide. Smaller items, as you know, are also very fun to make, and these have all been sold too. So someone is actually like valuing this stuff. So there is a huge value in the upcycling. Next slide. Another artist who was very focused on the impacts of the material on the ocean environment had an installation at a major laboratory, marine laboratory in New England. And here she is getting the raw materials and then the final product, or a part of the final product, on the right. Next slide. And finally, I want to talk about the artist that I'm currently working with on an actual collaboration, where she is only using debris that we collect from the national seashore in our area to create a commissioned piece, which will be installed on Earth Day. Next slide. And that is mock-up is in the center, and you can see that these techniques, I believe I'm not sure if she was the one who did a primary workshop with the ghost nets in Australia, but this is the way she operates as well, with the aperture made by a steel sculpture, a steel frame and then wrapping that and filling that. And this will be at the Cape Cod National Seashore. Next slide. And that's all I have today. And that is one of the largest sculptures ever made with the so-called debris that I gave to an artist. And it was over 320,000 pounds of retired lobster rope that was crocheted, painted, and stacked on very firm rebar. And it was in place for a year. Anyway, that's my presentation. I mean, I'm glad, I wish all of the islands the greatest of luck in managing your debris. And I hope that you can make a lot of money selling beautiful artwork with it.
Thank you so much, Laura. A wealth of information as always, and really appreciate you taking taking on this presentation, as I sent it to you, or sent the invitation to you very late in the day in terms of before the webinar. And I will say that any slides that are out of order are not your fault at all; they are mine. I had to screenshot each one from the PDF and drag it into the presentation, and I figured that what Windows was telling me the order would be was correct, but I didn't double check that against your presentation late last night. So it's not your fault. That's entirely on me, or blame Windows. That seems to be a common thing as well. So I might blame Windows for it, but fantastic presentation. Thank you again. Does anyone have any questions for Laura?
Hi, good morning, afternoon. I just want to ask about the lifetime of installation. So you mentioned this last one was in place for a year, but looking at it, I'm thinking of climate cooling solutions. So is it possible that it could have a long-term, if not permanent, lifetime?
Thank you for that question. This is one of my conundrums, is what it's fine, all fine and good to have a beautiful art piece, but what happens to it when it is reached the end of its life, however that is reached, whether it's the end of a commission or an installation or it doesn't last because it wasn't crafted, sturdily enough. This particular image shows a structural creation that has been looked at actually by several architects and engineers as something that is far more long lasting than a lot of materials on the market today. In fact, the paint that she uses, I don't know if you want to get that specific, is latex house paint. And it is, it can be reapplied on the exterior, and it is quite UV resistant. The rope itself, when protected, can also be remanipulated and used in many applications. And she has reprised this crocheted runners in many different sculptures after the life of this. The installation that's happening right now at the Cape Cod National Seashore is meant to endure no less than 3 years in situ. So it will be there, and it will be designed so that it will last through the elements for at least that long and not shed microplastics. And that's another piece of this that makes it frustrating. All those doormats made out of polypropylene do shed microplastics when they are degraded by UV or by wiping your feet on them. And so there's a lot of exchanges there. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do know that when treated properly, this material can reside in whatever setting it's in for a very long time, as it does in nature. But the key is the UV degradation protection, and then looking at what the application is of the installation or the structure, so that it's not creating more of a problem. My feeling is that it's not going to a landfill yet. It can be reused after the fact and in other creative applications. Some of these artworks are in permanent collections. There's one installed in Tennessee, which is an odd place in our country, that it's been there over 12 years. So yes, there are a lot of things that have permanence if you design it correctly. Not sure that answered your question, but I hope so.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question and a really good answer as well. And as we've highlighted before on this workshop, I think it's important to understand, and Laura's mentioned this as well, is I think the primary purpose is to prevent gear from either recovering it from when it's been lost and then finding use for it, or preventing it from getting lost in the ocean in the first place, or whether that's a river or lake or other waterway, but to prevent it from being in an aquatic environment where it can do harm to marine life, cause issues of safety at sea, transportation, navigation, whatever it is. So this is a way to do that, but it's not necessarily like we mentioned, even recycling. Well, what happens to the product at the end of the day, right? There's a life cycle that goes beyond these pieces, but I think the primary thing is to just make sure that it is not a danger to aquatic life, and that all the other issues that follow on from that are equally things that we should keep in mind. So Laura, you mentioned microplastic shedding and things like that. Definitely things we should be thinking about, but this is a step in the process, I think. And ultimately what happens to this material 10, 15, 20, or 50 years from now, I think is still a bit of an open question, but it removes the immediate danger to aquatic life and brings it up onto the land. So in some cases, landfilling is really the only thing that you can do with it. It's better than it being out in the ocean, arguably. Well, I think some might argue that, but I think it's definitely better than being out in the ocean. But that in itself is not like a final best case solution, but I think we're working towards that. So it's all a bit of an iterative process to get there. Any other questions for Laura before we move on to our next speaker? And again, we will have a little bit more time after the speakers to sort of have a bit more of an open discussion about these things. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Thank you so much, Laura. I know that I'm not sure if you'll be able to stick around for the rest or not. I know you're very busy, but I do appreciate you accepting the invitation to do this presentation on such short notice, and for participating in the webinar. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joel.
All right, and our next speaker is, there we are, Emmanuel from the SOFR initiative. Emmanuel, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Terrific. Take it away, please, my friend.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Sofa. I am the founder and executive director of Stand Out for Environment Restoration Initiative. It's an NGO in Nigeria. It started from just the need to create environmental awareness and get young people to be aware of the issues we cause to the environment. I mean, it started as fun. Glad to know that Mr. Pontin was an air traffic controller. I am an air traffic controller. That's what I do full time. And just the thought of wanting to help the environment be better by engaging my friends and by expanding was what led me to starting the organization SOFR Initiative. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be talking about HubNet and the Community Integrated Center. But before that, I just want to tell you a little about what SOFR Initiative stands for. We're Stand Out for Environment Restoration Initiative. When we started, we just wanted to raise environmental awareness, like I said earlier, and then support community actions when we go to communities and they're already taking actions to solving environmental issues, the need for us to willingly help them to talk about these issues and deal with them, and then also promote positive attitude towards the environment. And we did this by just starting a volunteer organization. Next slide. A volunteer organization, and the essence is for us to have people participate in activities without expecting any form of return. And how do we do that? Is by setting up creative activities where young people can come have fun, but yet be able to solve some of the environmental issues. Like you can see, we have like basketball, volleyball. Sometimes we play some certain games, and while we're doing this, we're either doing a cleanup or putting up certain workshops to educate people about environmental issues. And this led us to the GGGI. We met the GGGI after I was given a UN prize for marine litter problem and solution at the 6th IMDC. In one of these activities during our cleanup exercise at the beach, we took photos, and then the UN was celebrating with a photo contest that year. I applied, and then I won marine litter problems and solution. And while at the conference, I met with Ingrid Giskis, and I think I was in one of the sessions she was presenting, and on the map of discussion, every other continent was, every other region was discussed but Africa, and then I asked why Africa was not a part of the discussion, and she said because there's not been evidence or interaction with organizations from Africa. And I said, okay, we are just creating environmental awareness, but we can specialize if you give us a chance. And that led to my invitation to the GGGI conference. And at the conference, I met, I think it's in 2018, learned a lot, and then packed up all that we have learned, and then created a solution called the Fishing Net Gains Project. We started with the Fishing Net Gains Nigeria, and then expanded into Fishing Net Gains West Africa. Next slide.
Emmanuel, just so that you know, there seems to be some automatic timing in the slides, which is why they keep advancing. I can either keep going and try to manage that, or if you want me to take a quick 2-minute break or like minute break, I can try to remove those so that it's less disruptive. I will leave that up to you.
Oh, okay. I think if you can remove it, it'd be easier because it's
yeah. No problem. Just give me one moment. I'll stop sharing and I'll remove those timings from the presentation. So sorry about this, everybody. Let me just quickly do that. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully this fixes the issue. Please continue, Emmanuel. I'll move to the next slide.
All right, if it doesn't, we'll just roll the flow. So yes, so that takes us to the GCFI initiative creating the Fishing Net Gains products. And like I said, we started Fishing Net Gains Nigeria. One of the things we did first was we tried to understand what the essence of what a GGGI was about. And when we got that, we decided to go back and then create a solution and look at some of this evidence that we had found out even before the conference that was resident in our fishing communities. And then we created a project, 2-year fundamentals. We tried to create like a circular economy through this project that's meant to tackle problems of ALDFG and other related marine issues. So we are focusing or trying to get partners in other plastics, so we don't go retrieving only goods again. What happens if we find other plastics? So we are engaging with other plastic businesses so that we can split, handle the goods gear, and then get the plastic waste business people to just go ahead with the next one. So we're doing this in Nigeria, and we just extended to Cameroon, and we're working across the coast of Africa. Next slide, please. So for the Fishing Net Gains project, our strategy is to combine collaboration with communities, government, and other relevant stakeholders. The essence is to long-term try to create policies and practices that will help in the remediation of those gear. And we have been able to do this by, first off, getting to our focus is the local communities. We go to the local communities, engage them in some form of integration. We tell them about our project, try to get them integrated into the project. And while this acceptance is carried on, we try to go through the processes of research and development. We go in there with the acceptance. We take our time, a couple of days, research. We try to create awareness on the issues, so they'll be involved from the get-go. We source for the land, and we're working in 6 communities or 7 communities thus far, and we have not had any issues with land being given to us after our project has been laid out, where we build the hubnet. I will explain the hubnet later. Then we establish community integrated center that will be discussed as well. And importantly, recovery of ALDFGs on shore and talking to the communities to take in or recovering gears when they are at sea. And then we do a dive for data recovery program where we educate the divers, and then craft and women empowerment. We teach the women how to create craft from this waste net that have been processed at the hubnet. And then engage in stakeholders workshop, and eventually at the end of the project, we try to create a national conference where conversation is had at all levels, and with the focus on the government to improve policies to help in the remediation of those gear. Next slide. So as you can see, some of our strategies from the get-go is creating an analysis, creating a needs analysis. And to do this, we engage by going to the government, having conversation on the issues. The Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, Nigerian Institute of Maritime and Safety Authority, and other relevant government organizations, and then to get their support, to get their participation. After that, we're able to go to the communities to engage with the elders of the community. Like you can see in the picture, this is us in Cameroon, after we extended our project, where we were talking to the local fishermen at the level for which we wanted to get them involved in our project. And we do a needs assessment by talking to the fishers directly on the beaches while they are less busy. Next slide. This takes us to the objectives of the Fishing Net Games project. And for the objectives, we give me a minute. Okay, for the objectives, like I said earlier, we just want to raise awareness on the issues of ALDFGs. We want to generate relevant data. This is important for tracking of data and information concerning lost and abandoned gears. We want to also formulate and negotiate recommended practices with the relevant authorities. It is a new topic here in Nigeria, and I would say clearly around Africa. And so it's hard to even start the conversation. But because we want to get the government involved, since they're going to be driving the policies, we try to engage them from the get-go. And some of our objectives is to collect and treat, and importantly, upcycle end-of-life gears for craft production. We propose sustainable solutions to recycling. We engage in like contests, like national craft contests, where we get people at different levels to compete for a certain prize. And then this gives us an idea on the, after the competitions, be able to get ideas for which we can engage in bringing solution. And I think that is how we even got to the later part of this presentation, where you see some of the production from the Goose Gear engagement. And we want to empower women and girls. That is our front burners, because we realize that most of the fishing being done in Africa is by men. And so the women are left behind to just cater for them. And most of the communities live below $1, below the poverty line. And so we want to try and empower them to find to find solutions to problems that would be able to help them, sustain their families, whether or not their husbands are home. And then we want to promote community integration. Our project is not wholly driven by us or focused on us. What we try to do is we try to integrate the community. So by the time the circular economy is created, they can go ahead and continue with the project, whether we're there or not. So we are wholly concerned about that, about making sure that the community are involved and are accepting of the project and willing to continue. Because we indulge them at a different level, the youth, the women, and even the elders, they embrace this, and a lot of times they run along with it. So at the end of the day, what we'll do is monitoring and evaluation. So we also want to help the fishers understand sustainable fishing practices. So we'll create a chance where we get some education, because they want a well-rounded solutions. A lot of times we go to these communities, they tell us about some of the problems that have been proposed, but was stalled. And we are trying not to be counted as one of those people that will come with a solution that's going to be stalled across the line. So what we do is we try and engage other businesses and corporates to come and promote things that will help the fishers to get sustainable practices. So we educate fishers on data management, create awareness on issues of marine debris, especially ocean plastics, and then the divers, we train them on goose diving. Next slide, please. So the project summary for us basically is to extend the economic frontier, like I said, to the coastal communities. We want to empower them enough for them to start engaging in businesses from what is considered waste at the coast. We want to widen community involvement, especially with UN environment, and because we are concerned in bringing a voice to this local community. They are not involved. Most of our fishing done around here are unregulated, and so the government do not pay attention to artisanal fishing or the fishing communities. So we're trying to empower them to be able to have a seat at the table and have a conversation, even at the UN level, concerning issues around fisheries. And our project also wants to reduce economic challenges of women, as I explained, and the youth, especially in these communities, then strengthen environmental values and improve viability and sustainability when it comes to marine life by reduction of ALDFG. Next slide. So how do we do this? This is our wheel of program. We first off, once we identify a community, we go ahead to do like a preliminary investigation, pay a first visit, talk to the community leaders, look around, look for the evidence of those gear. If it's present, ask questions about what is obtainable at sea. And if we have relevant proof that these evidences are at hand, then we go ahead to engage the community, which is our next step. We engage the community, starting from the elders. A lot of times, it is very important in Africa for you to pay attention to the elders. So at the community level, we try to engage the elders. When we get those approval, then we start engaging other aspects of the project. And so this opens up for the research and development. And with this research and development, we are able to ask questions, specific questions about specific communities, and the issues surrounding them. While we're doing this, we're also engaged, we're also talking to the elders for providing a place for us to construct our fishing hub nets. Like I said, I'll discuss later. And then for the onshore recovery, there are a lot of gears that are abandoned on the shores because of capacity for recovery, for offshore, for recovery at sea. It's quite expensive to get diving kits, divers to be involved in the process of recovery at sea. We try to work with the communities during our awareness, give them power to want to do recovery on shore, because there's a facility called the HubNet where this recovered gear can be deposited. And then we create a stakeholders workshop where we bring the men, the fishers, the women, the government stakeholders in a conversation at the local level, at the community level, to discuss this issue. And this is where we talk to them about peculiar issue by asking them if they have solutions. I spoke about this in Korea, and I also want to mention a lot of times when we're trying to come up with solution for maybe a community like ours, we go there, do a preliminary investigation. A lot of time we think we know what the problem is, but it is very important to have a conversation with them, not just about the problem, but also get them to suggest solutions to this problem, because this will help you be able to find a way to align and then give them an opportunity to go like, okay, we contributed to this. And if my organization isn't there anymore, they can continue with the project because it is an integrated project. And then we educate divers. We call for volunteer divers when they come to little workshop and educate them on goose diving and ask for their details if they want to dive for the purpose. And we have gotten as far as 96 volunteer divers that are in our record. And then the craft workshop, which is one of the very important aspects and is one of the sustainable solutions that we're working on, is the women. We try to work with the women. Every community we go, we try to train like 50 women on learning basic craft. And then we give them opportunity to be creative as well on creating some of these solutions for themselves and ask them, what can you do? You know, in as much as we have our solutions, like I saw the very beautiful presentation by Lynette and Laura on what is being done around. I can't wait to engage with them further. But we try to get these women to think about creative work before we go ahead to engage them in what we consider something that can be beneficial to them. And then the offshore recovery, when we get the capacity to, we try to get the volunteer divers to go at sea to help us recover. And at the end of our program, we'll do a national conference and see what we are able to resolve when it comes to resolution in the aspect of policies. Next slide, please. So these are the locations where we are in Nigeria. This is the south of Nigeria. To the left is Benin and Togo and Ghana towards the west coast, and to the right is Cameroon. So the GGGI and Ocean Conservancy funded our first two locations, which is in Taiwa and Ibuno at the south of Nigeria. And Ottawa and Ibuno became pilots. And after this was established, after we had engaged the community, built the HubNet, and then trained the women, we decided to get further funding, and then the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada funded an extension from 2 locations to 6, 3 more in Nigeria and 1 in Cameroon. And we can see that within 2 to 3 years, we've been able to establish projects in this location. Next slide, please. Yeah, so now to the HubNet. The much talked about HubNet is just a simple shack. So you guys can tell it is from, nets and hub, just coined it to give us a name for which to call the shack where the bulk of the things are done. So the HubNet is a data collection and collection center. We collect not just data, we also collect the ghost gears recovered by the fishermen. You can see in the second picture that the fisherman that recovered some ropes and nets and is getting his information taken by the data collector. And the data collector takes this information, collects the gear, weighs them, like you can see on the right, weighs the gears for impurity, and then we go ahead at the HubNet also, because we employ the community youth to be the ones mounting the HubNet. They now go ahead, treat these nets, and then reserve them for the next purpose for which these nets are created or these nets are collected. Next slide. So from the HubNet, we go to the CIC. Now, the CIC is Community Integrated Center. The Community Integrated Center is one of the places that we consider the heart of the entire project. This is where, after all the collection and treatment of the waste nets recovered or waste gears, because we do separation and then also try to use other components of the waste gears to do several other things. But the focus, because we are wholly driven by gillnet and ghost nets in our fishing in Nigeria or the west coast of Africa, we focus our solution on upcycling these waste nets. We can see the women at Badagry, I mean, on a normal day when the men are fishing, and now we're creating an opportunity. They can sit, try and create pom-poms and all forms of ideas and work on some of these waste nets that have been treated by the HubNet. And at the moment, the HubNet gives free treated nets to these women for them to work on the craft. In the middle, you see these. This is one of our craft workshops. This was during COVID, that's why they are all masked. And these are a few of the solutions they were able to create instantly within a 3-day workshop. And then there's a little contest while they are doing this to encourage them to begin to continue working. You can see string bags, you can see carpets, a floor mat, you can see handbags. All these were created within 3 days of a workshop with these women at these local communities. And then to the right, you can see one of our craft trainers. Now, during one of our craft contests, we got one of the winners to come up with a solution for us where we can use waste nets combined with wool using the loom machine to create the fabric. So this fabric idea, which I can't talk into, you know, this fabric, this fabric now is what we use to make different types of materials. So we are now specializing more in the product of the fabric. We are now specializing more in the product of the fabric. And next slide.
Happy to move on to the next slide, Emmanuel. Just flagging that we only have 15 minutes left, and we do have one other presenter. So I don't want to rush you. This is amazing work. I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to present. So I'll move on.
In less than 5 minutes, I'm done. Okay, the next slide, I'm ready. Draw the next slide. Okay. Okay, so now we try to create a circular economy where we have a system from the HubNet to the Community Integrated Center where the craft is done, where these bags and shoes are made, and then money, profits made, and then it goes back to the HubNet. It is important. When we started, we didn't know how we're going to connect this cycle until we created the marketplace. And now we are having the women not just collect this net for free, but also go back to the hub nets to buy this. And the essence for this is for the hub net to be sustainable, and then for the fishermen that recover these gears to be rewarded. So we have a reward system that brings the fishing nets to the hub nets, where the cycle continues, and we don't have to be there physically to make sure this is done. Once this economy is sorted out, they can continue the work. Next slide, please. And then now we're creating a business model where you have different communities begin to create business, where you have the CIC, and in another community without a CIC, there can be a trade. They can get their hub nets, they can get their waste nets and trade it to the communities where there is CIC. And when the fabric is made, the trade continues, or when the products are made, the trade continues in that regard. So it keeps the business model running across the coast of these communities. Next slide. In review, in just 2 years, you can see what we have been able to achieve from the number of hub nets that have been created, the communities engaged. We have done 1.5 tons recovered without funding any of this. And we have about 216 kilograms that have been upcycled. The flip-flops you can see there are instant products that were made by women during the craft workshop. And you can see 278 women have been trained thus far. Next slide. This is just a picture of what the net was. Like you can see, we work basically with gill nets, and after the weaving, we can get this fabric that we can use to make. For now, we're focusing on shoes, and we're engaging with the business enterprise now. As a matter of fact, 2 days ago, I just got named the Entrepreneur of the Year for World Association of Small and Medium Enterprise for this work that we're doing. And business engagements are coming for us to make production of shoes and bags with this considered waste combination of wool to make fabric. We call it the fishing gear fabric. Next slide. And these are products in the next slide of some of the things we have made. We're still working on it. We're improving. Because initially we wanted to put shoes on the feet of kids in these local communities. That's what drove the essence for which we created this project, and for now we are looking for business partners and opportunities for us to be able to expand in this enterprise. And the next slide, these are partners, people we've worked with. GGGI, our mother in this solution. And then we are also members of Lolita. We are a member of the National Task Force. We're contributing to some of this solution at the national level. And WASMI is the business angle that's connecting with us. We also got the John and Sue Foundation grant that helped us kickstart our project, and then Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Ocean Conservancy. And that takes us to the last slide, where we see Adidas, and then we see what our solution could be. As a matter of fact, I wore these shoes, not the Adidas now. This is what Adidas did, but we have been able to create this initially, and we're hoping that someday the fishing gear fabric is going to provide shoes for a lot more people than just people within our communities. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I really appreciate that. Wonderful presentation, and apologies for having to rush a little bit at the end just in order to make time. I think there are a couple of questions in the chat. So let me see if I have a couple. I'm just connecting with our other presenter at the same time. Nicole from Net Your Problem has asked, is the fabric available for other people to purchase?
Yes, we are trying to produce enough to have capacity for us to sell at large scale. Like I said, we're limited. We just make the loom. The loom machine now can just produce a few fabric, but we're learning on how to construct the loom machine so that we can do more, so we can engage more communities and increase the amount of fabric. But with negotiation, we can work to producing certain fabric and meet up demand if need be.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. One other question that we have is, are fishers compensated for their nets? What are the specific products made from gill nets?
So the gill nets, that is what we use. If you see the picture, the lead fishing gear fabric that was made out of that shoe, you would see the white sort of brownish stripe. Those are the nets. Combined, the red is wool, and then we combine it in that weaving pattern to be able to get us this fabric. And these nets are made of gill nets. We also have others that are made from cast nets. And so, yes, for now we're focusing on this, but we have other products like shoes and then, bags and floor mats that are made from this cast nets and gill nets as well.
Perfect. I just wanted to, sorry, I'm communicating with our other presenter in the background. Kendall is here. So Kendall, thank you for joining. Although she's not in a presentation-friendly place, unfortunately, the way that the day has worked out. So Kendall, I don't want to put you on the spot. I wonder if it would be possible. Kendall did provide a video of her presentation, but as we learned with the other video earlier, we're having trouble with the audio, so it wouldn't quite work out as her voiceover that she went to the effort to record wouldn't play. So Kendall, I don't know if you might be able to just give like a 2 or 3 minute overview of what's going on with Beyond the Reef, and then we can share that video with everybody that's on the webinar afterwards to ensure that people are able to see it. Is that something that you're able to do?
Yeah, I can do that if needed.
Okay, I just don't want to rob you of the opportunity to actually present. So yeah, just give you like a 2 or 3 minute overview of what is sort of contained in that presentation, and we'll make sure to share it after the fact. And apologies from my end as well for us going a little bit over time, but I think it's been really good information and good discussion. So I might hand it to you quickly.
Do you want to put the slides up for that and I can just talk through it?
Yeah, I can do that. I think they're actually here. 1 second here. Yes, I actually do have the slides prepped, so sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're ready anytime.
Okay, great. So we are Beyond the Reef. We're a British Virgin Islands based nonprofit organization. And can I scroll through these, or you're scrolling through, right?
Sorry, Kendall, I'll have to scroll through them.
Okay, no problem. So go ahead and scroll anytime you like. So we work towards creating innovative ways to help the marine ecosystem while also generating positive publicity for the islands and educating the local community on the importance of ocean health. And a few ways we do that are through shark research. We've recently started whale research. We also do coral restoration and stony coral tissue loss disease. The guy that you see in the back there is a shark airplane that's acting as artificial reef. And then we also do ghost gear, which is why we're on this call now. So you can go to the next slide. So just a quick map of the British Virgin Islands. We are located fairly close to the US Virgin Islands as well as Puerto Rico. And the next stop for us across the ocean is Europe and Africa. So it is a big ocean in the Caribbean, as everyone knows, that is able to have gear come over and drift and accumulate. And so we often get it on the south side of the bottom islands and the north side of that top island, Anegada. If you want next slide. I think everyone here knows about ghost fishing, so we can probably skip to the next one, as well as the next one. These are all, I guess, just some photos. But what we've tried to do is really get a lot of community participation to begin helping with the cleanups. And because we're a relatively small territory of about 25,000 people, we have a community board on Facebook that also gives great publicity for all of this. And so it's hit a point where we feel like most everyone in our country is pretty aware of this problem, and becoming more and more eager to help every day. If you want to go to the next slide. So there's a few ways that we clean up our gear. One is that we pick it up off of beaches, and we often recruit volunteers for this. Sometimes it is tourists because we are a big tourist country, but most of the time it's the local community. We've also gotten in with the school system. So now we get to recruit all of the kids for their high school hours, which has been great. Next slide. Sometimes we also have to swim it in from shore, and luckily we're partnered with a commercial scuba diving organization. So we have a lot of boats and commercial divers who are able to help us with this. Go to the next one. I think this is just showing that sometimes they have to swim through stuff that isn't as fun as others. And that is a lot of sargassum that they're swimming through. We also will sometimes free dive nets out. A lot of times when we're just doing other work, we see the nets, or if people are ever going through an area again, whether it's the local fisherman, a tourist, we've even had helicopters spot large nets from above. Everyone will know to report it to us, and we will try to go out and retrieve the net. And then we also do scuba diving for ghost gear. And this is especially for pots, which we also have a lot of because we had two very serious category 5 hurricanes in 2017 called Irma and Maria. And those really scattered about all of the fishermen's pots. So it's currently believed that there are over 5,000 pots missing in our territory. And sometimes we also have to use heavy machinery for some of the nets. The one you see on the left was actually one called in by a helicopter that they saw in a place that most boaters wouldn't go. And so again, because we're partnered with the commercial diving company, we are able to retrieve a lot of this gear. And that's just it, going back on a barge. So go to the next one. So what to do with it? That is our main problem. We're able to collect large masses of it, but then the issue is that we only have an incinerator, which is just basically burning our trash on island. And we really do not like that solution. If you want to go to the next one and the next one. So yes, because we don't have any sort of main recycling program, we've begun to stockpile a lot of the nets in a warehouse, hoping that in the next year or two, we can come up with that solution. If you want to go to the next one and maybe skip over to another one. We also have community members beginning to make some items with it, which is definitely not really a long-term solution for us. As you can see, there is a dog leash on the left, which is actually very well made, but very time consuming. And then we have some people who have been making jewelry, some more tasteful than others. But that, again, is also not a long-term solution for us because we just have so much volume of net that community members making anklets here or there is not ideal for us. And we also do not want to be burning the trash. So Chris, who is not on now, that's why we were trying to pre-record, but it didn't work. So Chris, my partner in the company, he has an idea that he could bring somewhat of like a Caribbean net connection around where we would partner with other islands and he would have a barge go around and pick it up at certain points, also creating some incentive programs for the fishermen to be the ones that are cleaning this out. And if not, we're hoping to also set up some sort of recycling program on our island, since shipping it to other countries would also be somewhat unenvironmental and probably cost prohibitive unless we were really going around and collecting all of it. So this would be the next slide now, is that we are hoping, you can go one more over. Oh, I think that's a video, but we had our information up, hoping that we could then connect with some other people in other islands or really anywhere, which I think is what this webinar is doing, just to help us figure out the best ways that we can go about recycling this, because we are really good at collecting it, but not good yet at doing anything sustainable with it. So if anyone wants to connect with us and give us some ideas, I know we're also hearing a lot today, then that would be great.
Great. Thank you so much, Kendall. I really appreciate that. And sorry for the truncated window in the presentation as we approach time. But I really appreciate you being here. And if it's all right with you and Chris, we are very happy to circulate the full presentation that you both did with voiceover. We're having audio issues for whatever reason. I don't know why. It might have been my headset earlier. I'm not sure what it was. But we'll make sure that with your permission, we can share that with the group here via Dropbox or something like that, if that's all right.
Yes, that would be great. Sorry we weren't in a more presentable place this morning.
Don't apologize. No, that's totally fine. And it's my fault. I just think there was really good discussion and information going on. So we're actually at time for the webinar. And we haven't actually hit the discussion part of it just yet. However, what I will say is we still have a good amount of people online. I am happy to stick around and answer some questions. If any of our panelists, presenters, and anyone else would like to stick around, I mean, please do so for a little bit longer so that we can facilitate some of that discussion. Obviously, for those of you who have to leave, we totally understand. I mean, the 3-hour commitment is quite a lot at the best of times, but we'll happy to keep the webinar open for a little bit longer so that we can answer some of these questions and facilitate some of that discussion. So Kendall, I don't know if you have a couple of minutes in case anyone has any questions for Kendall specifically.
Yes, I certainly do.
Terrific. Are there any questions for Kendall? Oh, Peter, I see you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Hi, Kendall. I've recently done some work out in the British Virgin Islands on capacity building in the fisheries. And in the process of that, we were doing questionnaires with fishermen and finding out about practices and abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear. Now, the impression I got out there in the fisheries that it's very much kind of trap fisheries, but you mentioned nets in your presentation. So are they coming from elsewhere?
Yeah, so sorry, that was a part of the presentation that I did not do this more. I think that was in yesterday's version I recorded. So yeah, most all of our nets are coming from other places. Again, so after the hurricanes Irma and Maria, that really brought a ton, just because, you know, that was a massive washing machine into the island, but they continue to come. So we continue to record what we're picking up in each location, wondering if it's going to be less and less each time. And it's a little less, but it really does continue to pile up. So it's mostly the south side of our islands. Like I said, our other sides that are more frequented by tourists are beautiful. You would never really know that we had that problem, but it's the outer islands that no one is really going to. And also that are really hard to access because there's just not a way to get on the island. So we usually have to save those ones for more the commercial dive guys who can swim into the island and begin to clean it. But you are correct that most of the fishing happening with the local community is in fish pots. And so that's what we're hoping to also have a discussion on coming up and trying to get some more disposable pots in like a trap disposable. So something that will open up after, say, 30 or so days. Because at that point, it's considered a lost pot anyway. If you're leaving your trap for more than 30 days, you don't really need it to be intact. So it would just let a little lever down and then they could pick it up and put it right back with another biodegradable twine the next time they put it out. And we also don't have a great registration system for pots right now. So that would be the other goal moving forward, is to actually get them registered and put tags on them the way that a lot of other countries, like the US, for example, do. And then that way we can come across a pot, see the tag number on it, and actually return it to someone, which would be beneficial for them also. So the discussions are just starting to happen. And I think everyone seems very open to it. But yes, that was a side tangent for yes, most of the nets coming in are not from us. The pots are from us.
Great, thanks very much.
That's a great point, and then it's something that, again, the folks from Erebarts have experienced that. Hawaii experiences that a lot, where a lot of the gear that's washing up in the archipelago is washed or sort of washed in from the North Pacific Gyre, which comes from countries all around the Pacific Rim. So not a unique situation. But we also have a question from Nicole. Please go ahead.
Thanks for this. I'm psyched to hear that you guys have a warehouse full of nets. That's the model that we have also. But I'm just curious, what would be acceptable disposal options for you? I feel like we have this pyramid that we use to make decisions about how stuff gets disposed of, given like what type of plastic it is, how dirty it is, if it's mixed or not mixed, or baled or not baled. And so I think, you know, in my experience, the options for ghost gear are fairly limited in case, unless you want to like specifically sit there and untangle everything and put it into its different plastic types. It's going to be very hard to recycle. So you mentioned that you weren't interested in incineration, but would like pyrolysis or waste to energy or waste to alternative fuels, would any of those be disposal options that you would consider?
Yeah, 100%. This is what I was saying. We don't really, we're not remote experts on that portion of it. I think anything that we could do with it other than just putting it into the incinerator that then goes into the air would feel much better. So I think we're open to everything. And that's something that I know Joel has been had on his radar that we're really hoping to try and change also. So currently we're kind of just hoarding ghost gear. The bigger nets, you know, the smaller stuff, as you mentioned, the stuff that's dirty or torn up or more microplasticky, that's ending up in trash bags that we are just sending to the trash. But it's the big nets that seem like they have potential to have some sort of upcycling that we're really holding on to. Also because the smaller stuff just seems it's much more broken down already, so it's harder for us to store. But some of the really big nets, like the ones that I posted, that needed a crane or a barge to get them out, you know, those are so big that we feel like there is a potential to do something with them. And if we were able to get some infrastructure, that would be what we kind of began to trial with. So yes, definitely. I guess the short answer to that is yes, we are open to anything that is better than what we currently have.
Sounds great. Let us know if we can help in any way.
Yes, I would love to connect with anyone on here who can even just teach us a little bit about the grading system for that and everything else that you mentioned. So definitely.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Nicole, you mentioned the pyramid that you have. I've seen that in your presentations before. I think it's really well done. So if it would be useful, I think we're going to try to set up a Dropbox folder. Again, it will be the Beyond the Reef presentation will be in there, and a couple of other things, probably a PDF version of the presentation we had today, with folks' permission, the videos that were shared that were part of the presentation as well, if that's doable. And so if you'd like to include, you know, a document that has that pyramid model or whatever in there, I think we're happy to include that as well if it's useful for people, because I've seen it and it's well done.
Yeah, I can send you just like the JPEG of that, Joel, and you can include it. Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, that would work out well. Because again, I think it highlights the question, or it highlights the thing that's been mentioned here, that and we've mentioned a couple times on this webinar, that recycling might be sort of the tip of the pyramid, but that's not going to be possible everywhere. And there is sort of a well structured and laid out set of options in that JPEG that you're talking about. So I think it would be good for people to see, because it's just not always possible to do what we would consider to be traditional recycling. So that's great. I see Alan, you've got your hand up as well. Please go ahead.
Sorry, thanks everyone. As you raised some of the challenges, as I don't know what was said before, I had a challenge with technology. However, within the wider Caribbean region, I think it's speaking about the wider Caribbean region as it relates to this, it's transportation. So how do we get everything to one spot? Now, with some of the presentation, and there's a lot of things that has been done globally with GoScale initiative. Montreal, I think, joined as the 14th member state in 2018. My question is, because when we discuss if even in some places, the fish traps are actually different. And what I would suggest is that I'm happy that you're you're doing what you're doing in Jamaica and the Caribbean member states, that we get feedback. I have to reiterate this, because it's not a one fix solution. We are all similar. We have islands that have shallow reefs, and we have islands that have deep reef. But getting it from point A to point B is going to be a challenge. And that is why we probably need sustainable financing. And if we can do a joint project to do this, this is where we can all speak online now, seeing 50 participants online. We can do this, and if we have our CARICOM member states, which includes the OECS, however, to include one or two of the UK overseas territories, the French territory, and that we can do what we need to do. We need a collaborative approach, and well, sorry, and Dutch also. So within the wider Caribbean region, we need to calibrate a pilot project. I'm suggesting that we do a pilot project with 6 member states, technicians. We move forward to overseas territories of the UK, overseas territories of France, overseas territories in Netherlands, Kingdom of the Netherlands, and OECS, CARICOM member states to include the OECS. I think let us pull even 5 countries together and do a pilot project. This will help us. So you will have it straight across. But remember, policies and laws are different. The French is different. Kingdom of the Netherlands is different. UK is different. OECS and CARICOM is technically different, but we all have to collaborate together what we're doing. So I'm only rambling basically to indicate that let us do that a project. Let us see if we can fund it, that we can include all the agencies in the wider Caribbean. And for those of us, OSPESCA, because OSPESCA is part of, we have been, so even Belize, which is part of this, but it's OSPESCA, it's a wider Caribbean region, and with the ministers, or the ministers that are available, we can all make that decision. And that would be a good project, because we need to move forward. There's something that OECS is doing, ocean governance, where you have a team. So within this remit of what you are trying to achieve, let us form a team within CARIFORUM, which include Santo Domingo, Spain, Ospesca, and the wider region, and we get a team together and make our plans and advise the ministers through the committee. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Owen. I really appreciate that. And speaking quite frankly, you know, you mentioned Triple GI. I met you I think for the first time in Montserrat in 2017 at the CRFM meeting, and it was really out of discussions with you then that has led to this body of work. I would say overall, I think you held the chair of the CRFM at the time, the rotating position of chair, and really, I think that you've been instrumental in helping to drive this work forward. So you deserve a lot of credit for that, especially as it relates to our work with CRFM and CARICOM and where we would be able to go from here. So I think I would love to touch base with you about that. Caribbean is a priority region for the Triple GI between now and 2030 at the very least, and as part of our long-term strategy. So let's follow up offline about how we might be able to implement something like that or plan for it over the longer term. So that's great. Thank you. I see we have a hand up from Pingo as well. Please go ahead, Pingo.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is actually not Pingo. This is Drake Sempija. Hi to see you, Joel, after a long time. This is Drake Sempija from Uganda. I'm a PhD student of Professor Pingo's here at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth in the US. My work is on abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gears in the inland fisheries of sub-Saharan Africa. So I'll be doing my PhD work on Lake Victoria, which is the biggest freshwater lake in the tropics and the second biggest lake in the world. And my question goes to maybe all of you on the platform. I'm interested to know if there have been any studies whatsoever that have been done specifically on inland fisheries, because I realize that most of the work has been done on the marine fisheries of the world, but not a lot has been done on inland, and yet inland fisheries are very important for economic livelihoods, especially in the developing world. And as you know, there's a lot of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, and we believe that there's a lot of, lost gear and ghost fishing that is going on. So if anyone has any information about any work that has been done in inland, I'd be interested to know about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And apologies, you're coming up as Pingo, so that's why I had mentioned that, but obviously the connection is obvious. I'll take a first stab at that. Yes, there has been a study done, I think, on the Ganges River a few years ago through National Geographic. I think Jenna Jambek and her team had done some research there. I'll have to dig it up, but feel free to reach out to me. My email is in the chat, and I'm happy to connect you with that. And it did do found that a lot of what was found in the Ganges River was ALDFG related. We at the Triple GI have actually changed our terminology. It used to be talking about marine debris and marine environments. And over the last few years, it's become very clear that it's not just a marine issue, as you're saying. So we've changed to the term aquatic, which encompasses both. So rivers, lakes, any type of waterway, including the ocean. We have done some initial preliminary work on one of the Great Lakes, Lake Erie in North America, to do sort of a predictive model of where, as we talked about before, some of our predictive models, one of them that we did in collaboration with our one of our members, natural resources consultants, who produces the models for us. They have done a predictive model for the Great Lakes. We're in the process of being able to share those predictive models a little bit more widely. We just have a few more, we have some folks to talk to about that, and there will be a way to get access to those for those who are interested in them in the near future. So that's something we're working on, as well as one of our Triple GI members, the Uganda Junior Rangers, has been doing some work on the Uganda portion of Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria has been something that I've been interested in for quite a long time. I've heard anecdotal reports from several people about the issues around ALDFG in Lake Victoria, and it's definitely a major problem. So yes, the short answer is that this is becoming more of a topic of interest, and that there are people working on that. And we at the GGGI have acknowledged, for a couple of years now, that it's not just about the marine environment, it's about freshwater systems like Lake Victoria as well. So happy to chat with you more offline about that, and happy to also see if anyone else has anything they'd like to say about that, since the question was posed to the entire group. And see if we have any other questions as well. But thank you for that one. Does anyone else have anything to add on freshwater relation to ALDFG?
Thank you, Joel.
My pleasure. Okay, are there any other questions? I realize we are 20 minutes over time and we still have 47 people online, which is excellent. Are there any other questions for anyone online, or anything else that anyone would like to bring up in the context of end-of-life gear disposal for the Caribbean? All right, well, with that then, I think this is a good place to end. Thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you so much for everyone who not only was able to be online, but stayed online for 20 minutes after a 3-hour webinar had already ended, or was supposed to end. Really appreciate that. The engagement has been terrific. The questions have been great. And thank you to everyone. Again, we will have more information that we will send out to everyone that registered for, in terms of like the Dropbox folder, where we'll have some of the workshop materials in place. And if anybody would like to connect with anyone, please just send us a note and we'll be happy to make those connections for you. So I believe that the recording, that there is a recording, Shalene, to answer your question in the chat. So Fadila, is that something that we'll be able to share?
Yes, we could. The recording will be generated by Zoom in a couple hours, and we will try to send out an email which will contain a link to a Dropbox folder, and that can have the recording, a copy of the presentation, the video, and any other material. So we'll aim to do that in the next day or two.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Well, thanks so much, everyone. I'll let everyone get back to their days. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's keep in touch. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Right.